My favorite drink in there, the LES Globetrotter.
Does it have gin in it?
No, bourbon
Really?
and Grand Marnier and a couple other things. It's so good, though. But here's the thing. You can ask for it, and they'll make it for you. It's not on their menu.
A drink that's not on the menu to a speak.
That is like, that's.
You have to give the bartender like the secret handshake?
Pretty much. All right, everybody. Welcome out to the Log Room, guys. Craft Beer Show. It is Tuesday, February the 1st, 2022. We made it to February. January's done already. Believe that? Jersey Johnny coming at you with me, as always, is none other than Mr. Beer Samurai. Say hello, Mr. Samurai.
Gongi Fat Shoy, everyone.
And that means?
Happy New Year. Happy Chinese.
Happy
well,
Chinese
they
New
don't.
Year.
Well, it's in Chinese, so you don't have to say the Chinese.
Well, I know, but
it is.
you just say Happy New Year, right?
It is beginning of the Spring Festival, even though it's freezing outside.
This is true.
It is called the Spring Festival.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got Chinese today, so I've got the fortune cookies.
There you go. Right away, right out of the bat, Brian Alt says, sup. Sup, Brian.
Sup. You got to do it with the chin raised.
Sup. Right.
So I've got my fortune.
What's your fortune for your Chinese fortune? Chinese fortune cookie fortune.
You will die in a flaming car wreck. Yeah. They always say that.
Well, it's better than help I'm being held prisoner in a Chinese fortune cookie factory.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Never heard it before.
No. Matt says Dave looks like he's going to boot camp.
I keep my hair really short in the winter because that way I can wear a hat without getting hat hair.
There you go. Very true. And Brian said sup because he assumed Dave was eating dinner or supper.
That kind of sup.
There you go.
No, sup's over. I'm having dessert now.
It's dessert time.
Well, actually, I got another dessert.
Well, yeah. Why don't you pull out the other dessert before you open your beer, which we were going to do after we bring the guest on. But
yeah, I know. But
you forgot.
I got really thirsty when we run late. It's actually National Dark Chocolate Day.
So happy National Dark Chocolate Day.
So I got the Peregrina dark chocolate with caramelized almonds.
Very nice.
Spot placement.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
The building I work in.
We'll send them the bill.
Yeah, they'll pay that. I work in a building, and the ground floor is Italy in New York. So,
there you go.
So I get all kinds of really yummy Italian stuff down there.
The ground floor is Italy. What's the top floor?
The top floor is it's not what it used to be.
Okay.
It's not the brew pub anymore, though they still carry the beer. Mm-hmm. But it used to be a brew pub.
Brewery, right?
Brewery. They changed the name of it. I forgot what they changed the name to, but they still have the beer. Mm-hmm. So you still get beer Balladine. Mm-hmm. I think you can still get some Russian River there because Vincenzo was part of that.
Because he was part of it, yeah. Well, it was Mario Batali, Vincenzo, and Sam Clagione.
Right.
Yeah.
And three brewers from Italy.
Right.
I can't remember them all.
Well, didn't they open a pizzeria? Three brewers from Italy? Three brothers from Italy.
That's brothers.
Right.
I see what you did there.
Gotcha.
But no, there's three brewers. I think it was Delcati. Mm-hmm. Delcati, Balladine. I can't remember the third one.
I'm not sure myself, so
yeah.
I wouldn't even venture a guess. So anyway.
So they still have that beer. They actually sell it downstairs. If you go into the market, you can find Balladine down there.
Well, that's good. That's very good. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now that we come to a crashing halt, derailed as usual, our typical derailment.
Okay.
All right. So
only one thing can save this.
This is true.
The guest.
So why don't I turn off the Happy National Dark Chocolate Day sign, and we'll bring on our guest for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest this evening is representing herself.
Did you forget?
No. She's representing herself. I'll explain later why I'm talking like this, but representing herself and Jester King Brewing and the Pink Boot Society too. Let's bring her on right now. It's Debbie Cerda from Jester King Brewing and the Pink Boot Society right there. I think she's the Deb, you're the community engagement coordinator for Jester King, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you're also
that's the title, but it encompasses many responsibilities.
I was going to say, I'm sure there's a lot more to it than just that. And you're also on the board of directors for the Pink Boot Society, correct?
Oh, yes, that's correct. I'm now entering my second year on the board of Pink Boot Society. I've been a member since 2011, 2012, but it's a really great opportunity.
Nice. That's awesome. We're going to talk about all of that today. And a bunch more. We got a jam-packed show.
Can't wait.
So, but before we get to it, we need to open some beer. So why don't we let, since you already opened yours, Dave, why don't you just tell everybody what indeed it is?
I've already brought the show to a crashing halt. You know, there's a story behind this. Because about two shows ago.
2 shows ago.
2 shows ago.
2 shows ago?
2 shows ago. Now I'm talking like you.
Now you're talking like me.
And I didn't take a header in the snow. We had Finkel and Garf on. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because, remember, we can't get it in Jersey.
Yeah.
So now, what people don't
it's only
realize,
distributed right around Boulder and Denver. It's not even. Yeah. It's not even all the way up to Fort Collins distributed. So.
But what a lot of people don't realize before the show, we'll talk with the guest a little bit. John and I will talk a little bit, and we're talking to our guest, and his name's eluding me right now.
Joshua Safer.
Joshua. And he told us that their beer was available on Beer Drop. Mm-hmm. So when we came live on the show, it looked like I was pretending to be busy. I wasn't pretending to be busy. I actually was on Beer Drop.
Ordering a bunch of beer for the first 10 minutes of the show.
And I've got a can of the coconut brown. Because what's my favorite adjunct?
Coconut.
And I'm looking at the crest here. Look at that. Look at there. You've got a big wheel on there.
Mm-hmm. There's a big wheel on there, yes.
That is awesome.
There's
a bunch of other stuff on there. They've got a joke on here. Do you know what 50 Cent did when he got hungry?
I don't know.
58.
That's even worse than some of my jokes.
Yeah, I didn't put that on there.
Yeah, really. So
don't yell at me.
Well, anyway,
at least the second beer I'm going to drink has actually the ingredients and not any bad jokes.
Well, there you go. So let's see the beer.
Oh, there's your beer.
There you go. Right. Looks very nice. How's it taste? Not good, huh?
It tastes very nice.
It's a tasty beer. All right. On that note, Deb, what are you drinking?
I am drinking the Jester King latest batch of the Jester King Munich style Helles lager beer.
Very nice.
Are you surprised, folks?
No, I'm not. I'm not shocked that you're drinking Jester King beer, and I'm not shocked that you're drinking a lager on the lager room. So,
the guests always try to drink lagers.
Guests always try to drink lagers.
We don't.
And ironically, I'm drinking 2 lagers tonight. So.
You are.
I am.
I've got 2 ales. Two dark beers.
2 dark beers. I've got 1 and 1-ish kind of. You'll see.
And another fortune cookie.
There you go. As you open the fortune cookie right in front of your microphone. So
yeah,
there you go. That's very nice of you. I appreciate it.
Well, that way everyone who's not watching can see as well.
They can see just through their ears.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. I will open mine.
You will die in a flaming carve again.
Well, okay. same one, I guess. Yeah. But I will open my first one. I'm going to be drinking Good King 12.
Good King 12.
8. I'm sorry. Yeah. No. 12. Yes.
Sure.
8.
58.
Well, that's what it was. It's supposed to be 8 rather. It says 8 on the can. It says 12 on. Hold on. Boop boop boop. There we go. Good King 8. There we go. I copied and pasted from online with that, so that was my bad. Good King 8, right there, from Source. It's a collab with Icarus Brewing here in Jersey. It is a Czech Pilsner.
I guess the reference is that Wenceslaus was Czech.
Yeah, I believe so.
Brian,
I believe he was.
Look that up for us.
Yeah, Brian, look that up. Brian just said, while I'm pouring, you can read this.
Well, he went to okay, show's over. We're at the top 3s.
He gave his top 3s already?
That's what you just popped. That's what you just popped up on the screen.
But we didn't even say what the top 3s were.
I know.
So why'd
you pop it up on the screen? You were delaying. You were stalling.
I was delaying. I was letting you talk while I was pouring my beer. There you go.
We'll save that for the
Well, I have to interject, guys. The reason why I thought you'd be surprised, not one, actually, was that I have a lager to drink from Jester King to drink with you. And because this is not, we're known for farmhouse beers.
Farmhouse beers, yes.
Right. And so this is part of our lager program that we started 2 years ago. Exactly 2 years ago, started making lagers. Hit a bit of a pause a little over a year ago, simply because we wanted to just make sure we're really doing it right with the right, having equipment that was really the best.
Gotcha.
So we did get a few, we have some new horizontal lager tanks that we received.
Very beautiful.
And so this is...
How big of the tanks are they?
I'd have to look back at the metrics on it, but I would say they're big. No, they're not.
They're pretty big.
Actually, I'll tell you how big they are. Our system is a 30-barrel system.
Okay.
And so essentially the way that when we brew, for the most part, we're doing single batches. We don't typically stack unless it's something like Petite Prince. Then we may go ahead and do 60-barrel, back-to-back runs. But we are not a 24/7 third shift brewer facility.
We're going to need you to vet a source for us.
Colin Bonilla just said 30 barrels each.
Thank you, Colin. He's just on a bus Debbie out for this right now. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Colin.
Colin, great.
That's perfect. Perfect timing with that's great.
Colin's awesome. He's fabulous. He's been doing our sales and distribution, and he's just a total rock star. I love working with him. We're really getting into doing a lot of offsite events. So, but yeah, all I know is I really love the beer. I think it's great. It's really, I've been really pleased with what we're doing. And also, again, always known for farmhouse style, branched out 2 years ago to start doing more. Basically, it was we like drinking these beer. Mm-hmm. We like drinking these styles of beer. We want to expand our portfolio in a way to also challenge our production team. And I think it's very fortuitous when you look at how the market's been going and then what's happened the last 2 years. Plus, we started canning 2 years ago.
Nice.
So if you think about January 2022 and then coming in and having a broader portfolio, beer that's packaged and much easier to access, be it curbside or sent out, then it's wonderful to drink a really quality Hellas. And it's a homage when you look at those beers that we just love locally, like Carl Kolsch over at St. Elmo's or Live Oak Pills.
Right.
As a couple awesome examples.
That's
awesome. Funny. We hear that from a lot of brewers and brewery owners that they're trending more towards the lagers because it's something they really enjoy to drink.
Oh, sure. I mean, you talk to any brewer or anybody involved in owning a brewery and working in it day by day. I mean, they're drinking a lager, they're drinking a pilsner. That's their go-to. They're not drinking double IPAs on a regular basis. More on that later. Foreshadowing. Well,
and you can also think about the fact that from a business sense, it makes sense that lagering is taking a lot more capital investment when it comes to the equipment, the amount of time it takes as well. But more importantly for us in Texas, it gets damn hot. So having control of your temperatures can be quite a bit of a challenge.
Sure.
I remember 10, 12 years ago, it'd be very difficult that if your glycol system went down, to find someone. There was like one person in Texas who could do repairs of glycol systems. I'm thinking about 2010, 2012.
Wow.
And then a lot of the tanks weren't jacketed that we were getting into Texas because they were coming from Canada up north. So really having to see how to set up a system, just controlling, having your temperature control for your L's was difficult enough. So now to get into this realm of lagering and all the nuances there, can be quite a challenge when you're looking at smaller systems. And when I say smaller, I'm saying 7-barrel brew pubs to 30-barrel, systems such as ours. I mean, obviously they're the big boys like Real Ale, Live Oak, St. Arnold's, who've been doing this, for quite some time.
Sure.
But yeah,
I got you. No, it's amazing that a lot of them are coming back, and I love the fact that there's so many lagers, and we're going to talk about that too, because you and I had spoken about the fact that there's a lot of styles there's some new styles, but there's a lot of rediscovered styles that are coming back into play. And Dave and I've mentioned this on the show several times, and it's a beautiful thing. I'm loving every minute of it. So we'll get to that. But one quick thing, Colin said killing it, Debbie.
Thanks, Colin.
And Annabelle Luna wants to know, Debbie, are you a brewer? So if you want to take that.
Yeah, I'll take that question. I am a home brewer, but I have not homebrewed in a while, because you imagine that if over the course of I have a portfolio career, so I have worked across different industries. But when you've spent time on a 30-barrel system or a 7-barrel system, it's a little hard to want to go back to making 5 gallons at a time. And when you work at a brewery that makes world-class beer, and you know that you can go just down the road to another brew pub, then yeah. Right now, I'm more into making a really great cortado or cappuccino at home, and not about making 5 gallons of beer at home. With that said, mead is something that I realize, hey, I procrastinate, so it's okay if I don't rack. With beer, if you don't rack it in a matter of days like you should, it has greater impact than waiting a week or so for your mead. But I've kind of been taking a hiatus for now as far as brewing. But I did actually think about this. My most brewing experience was for a brew pub here in Austin called Lovejoy's, and that was a very small system. It was pretty hysterical because you had to be careful. I was, touching certain things and not getting shocked. It was a 100-gallon system. We racked into 5-gallon corny kegs, old Coca-Cola and Pepsi.
Sure, yeah, soda kegs, yeah.
We would dry hop I remember having a dry hop by taking hop plugs and putting them into cheesecloth and tying each one of them, like having it set so it could go inside each corny on its own. So then, of course, later the bartenders would be upset because maybe something would happen and it'd come undone, and so the taps would get clogged. But that's what we were doing at the time. So, but it was kind of cool to work with the brewer at the time. I was assistant brewer for a short time. I say short time. It's like kind of contributing my time, because you'd be hard pressed over 10 years ago to actually pay most of your staff at a brewery or brew pub in the state of Texas.
Gotcha. Well, that goes for pretty much anywhere. I mean, my first foray into the beer business was here's some beer. That was your paycheck,
Yeah.
And as is most people, that back then anyway. It's a little different now. Not much, little different now.
Not much. The people that are just getting into it are willing to put in the time,
right,
just for the experience.
This is true. This is very true.
Yeah. So I first started homebrewing about 30 years ago, and intermittently in and out. And I've taught other people to homebrew, and some of them went into the industry as well.
That's awesome.
And actually, that's actually how I became involved with Jester King. Is I knew the founder through our local homebrew community, through our local homebrew club. So he used to bring his beer to the meetings to share, and we would give feedback. And he worked at Austin Homebrew Supply. And once he got open, it was like, hey, you want to come help bottle? And in fact, one of my best beer moments is that in all the years that I've been involved in the Texas beer industry was getting to taste my first drinking beer directly off a tank was the packaging day for a black metal, the most incredible Russian imperial stout. I love that beer so much.
One of the coolest labels.
Version. Yeah. And that was just so fabulous. But just being so firmly rooted in the homebrew community, as is many of our breweries here in Austin. When you look at Live Oak, when you look at ABGB, the founders all came from the homebrew community.
Sure. Well, yeah, that definitely comes. A lot of it does happen that way, and that's an awesome thing that they can grow their skills and everything else that they're learning as they're homebrewing, and tweaking while they're working with other homebrewers in those communities into their businesses. That's awesome. And based on something you just said, something tells me and you are going to have at least one of the same beers on our top threes later. But
very possible.
it's quite possible there. So
I actually purposely left it off my top three for
me
for John, and knew that would be represented.
All right, so that's awesome. That's great. I'm actually going to backpedal just 1 second, and then we're going to get into everything. question we ask everybody, and obviously you watch other shows, what's the first craft beer you can remember having? And again, it can be an ish, so.
I was thinking about this. It's kind of funny because I always think, it was having, and when you say craft, keep in mind I'm old. So it was
Do Dave and I look young to you?
Yeah.
Do I look good? It was like there was imported and there was domestic, and it was funny that things like Anchor and Sierra Nevada, they were considered imported for Texas.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Because there was no craft distinction, right? So if they wanted to charge more for these beers, they had to call them imports because that's what the level of pricing was.
Yeah, and so I would say what my first answer is typically, I first remember having Bass early on and loved Newcastle and all that, and it had to do with where I first was introduced to all this craft beer. But then I realized, no, in college, my first time out in college, my first try was at Texas A&M, and the beer that would get served there that was considered craft was Shiner Bock, which was really cheap. Right. So all the parties were Shiner Bock.
Sure.
So in a way, I mean, Shiner Bock is recognized as being a craft beer here in Texas. Yeah. And so I would say it was Shiner, but definitely that's sort of where I would say it got started.
That's awesome. I mean, they're Shiner Box. I mean, I've had plenty of Shiner Box. So in fact, I just had a Shiner Bock on the show. Shiner, not a Shiner Bock.
Shiner Bock, yeah.
On the show in December. I obviously it was Cheers, but but in any event, that's awesome. Shiner Box. That's a great one to go. I don't think anybody has actually said Shiner Bock was their first beer on the show yet.
No, I think one of our other Texas guests.
Yeah, maybe. You know what? Yeah, it could have been Steve or
I'm pretty certain Steve said. I think it was Steve.
I think it was Steve. Yeah. So, all right. Awesome. All right. What first got you into craft beer? Like into, not so much just drinking it. Obviously, that first Shiner Bock in college was probably what got you into drinking craft beer. But what first got you into like, this I really got to get more involved in this? Was it homebrewing, or was it the decision to start homebrewing, or was it something else?
No, it was getting severely underpaid as a preschool teacher after having tried the restaurant industry, and 2 weeks in was told I would never cut it as a waitress, which is pretty damn funny. In my first ever job. So I was a preschool teacher, but I wasn't making enough money. And I noticed that this local British style pub that I love to go to on weekends for music and beer was hiring cocktail waitresses. And because that's what they called them then. And I applied and got a job as cocktail waitress. And I made more money working two to three nights a week than I did the weekday. And so that's how I wound up kind of realizing I can't pay the bills off this, but I can definitely pay the bills working 3 to 4 nights. And that's how I started working at the historic ale house in Houston, Texas, which was mid 80s to late 80s. We had over 130 beers in bottles and then draft, which was unheard of at the time to have that. And so, I mean, that's where I'm firmly rooted, is being able to have a beer and look and see Michael Jackson at the end of the bar, or having people like James, John, and Don Young come in. In fact, one of my most memorable beer moments is tied to Young's The Family, and that distinctively remembering when I first met Pierre in 1989. And it was because of being there at the ale house. And then from the ale house is how I was introduced to the Foam Rangers, which is the oldest homebrew club here in Texas, who also pretty much originated the category of brown ale, Texas brown ale. It was the first competition. The Dixie Cup had a style, Texas brown ale. It was a category, and then later that was adopted by the California community, and then it became a style beyond that. So,
how does the Texas brown ale differ from the British brown ale?
The Texas brown ale, my understanding is it differs in regards to the IBU profiles, is a big part of it. I can't off the top of my head tell you what that recipe is, but I can tell you the significance of it is that a few years back when I was part of a kind of a political action committee to try to further legislation for brew pubs, we worked with other brew pubs across the state to say, and this was with a different company I worked with, that we said, okay, here's the recipe, what you should brew. And it's kind of, think of it just being basically what's called, I guess, just a California brown ale now, or in regards to the hop profile is a little bit different.
So it's more on the it's a little bit more hoppier than our typical English brown
Yeah,
ale.
just a little bit more. I will say, I've probably forgotten more things than some people might know about beer. The last time that we really revisited that was during this Texas Beer Freedom was the organization, the group that was several brew pub owners came together, and I was working for a brew pub at the time. We were trying to create awareness for the restrictions on brew pubs. So,
Gotcha.
so that's where everything for me was firmly planted. I was working at the ale house, and then beginning to homebrew as well, and as well as participate in competition.
Gotcha. That's awesome. That's a great story. Everything you just said about, especially about the brew pub in Houston, that was awesome.
And some royalty walking through.
And royalty walking through the door. Yeah, I mean, you can't.
Can I share a story with you?
Yeah, please do.
I want to tell you a story about Pierre Celis. My most memorable, meeting Pierre Celis, and that was so I was working at the ale house, and there was a wholesale beverage conference going on in downtown Houston, and we'd been invited to go down. And I went down and walked into the hospitality suite. And as we walk in, there is Pierre Celis standing there with, I want to say it's Chuck. It's the gentleman of C.R. Goodman. So they were a distributor importer here in Texas. And it was a couple of those guys with Pierre. And they said, oh, this is Pierre Celis with Hogarten. And they had beers, including the Verboten Freeze, or whatever it's, however you say it, the Forbidden Fruit, which you cannot get in the U.S. because the TTB says you can't have the I think it's Rubin or one of the classical artists because it had naked female on the front. But they had this beer, and the Chuck said, "Oh, we're trying to get Pierre to come to Texas and open a brewery here in Texas." I was like, "Wow, that's really cool. That's really neat." And I turn and I look, and but I'm just like, wow, this is incredible. This is the person who makes one of my favorite beers because I loved Hogarten White and Hogarten Grand Cru. And I turn and I look, and I see the youngs. I see the youngest young, who I would see often because he would come and sell beer to us because his father said, you don't get to just get the keys to the council and operate, Young's Brewing, just like Ken Grossman said to his son about Sierra Nevada, right? It's like, here's the mop, here's the bucket. And so he said, you got to go out and sell it. So I knew the youngest young, and he's sitting there, and behind him is his father, and then the other man was his grandfather. And he's watching television, and I'm like, what are you doing? There's a world-class brewer in the room. Why are you watching television? That's just so rude. But he's got his head in his head in his hands, and he's just like, what's going on? He's like, the World Series. I'm like, what? You're watching a baseball game? He's like, no, there's been an earthquake. The World Series has stopped, and we just got a container into the warehouse. Just got a container into the warehouse district full of beer. And he's like, oh my gosh. And he's watching on television, the warehouse district is on fire. And he's just shaking his head. And I'm not kidding you. He's sitting there, and his father turns to his grandfather, and grandfather just goes, that's the business. And it's just the idea of that.
The father said that, and the grandfather was like, hey.
The grandfather was like, hey, that's the business. There's going to be 9 generations of youngs behind that brewery. That's why it's like, I always remember the fact that I know exactly when I met Pierre because it was October 1989.
Yeah.
It was in that hospitality suite, and it was the same day as that. And then later he went on to move to Austin and open a brewery here in Austin. a few years
That
later.
was the San Francisco earthquake.
The San Francisco earthquake.
San
Yeah, the
Francisco,
Giants. Yeah.
the
The,
San Francisco earthquake. So yeah.
And I mean, as soon as you said that, I mean, I immediately went right back to October 1989. And I was like, yeah, that was you're sitting there watching it. I mean, we're watching the World Series. The game hadn't started yet, and everything's shaking. It was, oh my God. But anyway, the fire department coming by again, Dave?
you know, every time we have a show. So I got this.
He's across the street from the firehouse.
I got a really good professional mic that Carrie got me for Christmas, and it picks up everything, including because when I had the headset on, the cheapy ass Staples headset, you couldn't hear the fire trucks.
You couldn't hear it. It might be better to go back. No, I'm kidding.
No.
But in any event, that's an awesome story. That really is.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it's
and I'm not sure. And I'm not sure that everyone who's listening understand all the names that you just dropped.
Yeah.
So why don't you explain some of them?
Yeah. So Pierre Celis was this ties back to something that I'm sure Johnny will talk about. Is Pierre Celis was a milkman who in the 60s decided to brew, and he essentially rediscovered or saved the style of wit beer. By opening a brewery creating these beer in his small village in Belgium, in Hoegaarden. And then later in 1992, Pierre opened Celis Brewing here in Austin, and Celis Brewing became the first brewery in Austin in over 100 years.
They had 3 styles, right? They had the white, the Grand Cru, and the raspberry lambic.
White Grand Cru and raspberry, yes, to start, and then they had some others that they added on.
Which never made it. I don't think those made it out of Texas, because those are the only 3 we ever saw up here.
Yeah, I haven't seen any. I never saw any others up here besides those 3.
Well, and you may not have had Celis beer that was brewed in Texas. You may have had Celis beer that was brewed.
It could very well come from
to Michigan area, right? Whenever all that stuff. So
Well, we did get it before he moved to Michigan.
Okay.
There you go. On that note, we were talking about the World
Sirens.
Series and the earthquake and the sirens and everything else. Brian Alt just said he was in Cancun when that happened. There you go. And Brendan Forbes chimed in. He says he thought someone was just playing a drop after the earthquake story with the fire sirens.
We're not that good. We don't have that kind of technology.
Thanks, Brendan. Anyway, okay, and continue with the Youngs.
So then the Youngs, Youngs ESB, Youngs Ramrod, Youngs, I think, was it Best Bidder, Special Bidder?
Special Bidder.
Yeah, so these are very classic, very British classic styles that were available in the mid to late 80s. So you think about really so much of the imported beer that was available to us, and I say imported is that we definitely had a lot. Well, we were a British style pub, so it's obviously part of why we'd have that. But we did have a passport. It was around the world, and essentially it was the try to drink at least drink at least 100 different beers from 100 different places or whatever, then you would get a T-shirt. And we had quite a bit of British, but I remember we had Cooper's, which I liked Cooper's L.
Cooper's.
But yet then it was cut off because essentially it was just so expensive for them to export it from Australia and to get it into the U.S. But I will say, I mentioned about in our kind of pre-discussion or our discussion before about being a self-proclaimed hophead at one point or for a while. Right. Because Sierra Nevada Pale Ale was the first domestic, and I say domestic because again, back then the terms you used was microbrewery and imported, and these things have changed over the years.
Sure.
But Sierra Nevada Pale Ale was like oh my gosh, this is what hops are, and that was that's my desert island beer, hands down.
Oh, Sierra Nevada Pale.
Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, yeah, I think it is. It's an outstanding American Pale Ale. This is something I was behooving this weekend we were doing judging some beers and talking about how American Pale Ale it's almost kind of like the Merlot of the beer of the beer industry. Right. That it's something that kind of got bastardized so much at one point that then it became underappreciated. But then so I didn't drink American Pale Ale for a long time. And then I had a DC Brow American Pale Ale a few years back. I was like, oh, wow, this is awesome. This is great,
Right.
So.
Yeah, because they're not as prevalent as everyone's turned to the hazy IPAs.
Mm-hmm.
So now the people that are brewing the pale ales are actually putting care and craft back into them.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Sierra Nevada was, when I traveled for work, the whole reason I ate at California Pizza Kitchen is I knew they would always have Sierra Nevada Pale Ale on.
Sure.
So if I couldn't, otherwise I'd be eating at like Cheesecake Factory, and the best beer they'd have on was like.
Well, they'd have Sam on. You could always get a Sam.
Yeah, you could always get a Sam. But
anyway,
now there's another name you mentioned, and I just hope that no one thought we were talking about the King of Pop.
Michael Jackson, the beer hunter.
I certainly hope. Well, we certainly hope. All three of us certainly hope that there's many people on that are watching this now, rewatching this after the fact, or listening to it on the audio podcast that know who Michael Jackson actually is.
Not the Michael Jackson.
Who we're referring to. So. But
Michael Jackson was incredible. He was funny. What was kind of funny is sometimes I didn't even realize he was in the bar because he was a fairly frequent visitor. He also bared a resemblance to one of the owners of our place, and so it's kind of like, well, when you have a couple Michael Bolton mullets, curly-headed mullets in the bar, they start to all blend together,
Sure.
But he was really nice, and I'm kind of disappointed, but maybe relieved that as much as I kind of was definitely a fan of his because of the beer thing. I'm really kind of glad that I didn't latch into whiskey as I could have, because I tried something peated and it put me off of whiskey for decades. And I'm glad I didn't, because boy, I would be poor if I was buying whiskey back then like I am now.
Yeah. That's very true. It's as expensive of a habit as beer is, whiskey makes it look like it's a water habit.
Yeah, Scotch, and now
Scotches and everything else. Sure,
bourbon is now starting to approach the Scotch as far as price levels are concerned.
Some bourbons are more than Scotches. Good Scotches. So
Pappy.
That's insane. Sure.
Yep.
Absolutely. And but in any event, all right. Let's talk a little about Jester King. Let's switch gears to that. When did you first get involved with the brewery?
I first got involved, I would say probably, and again, I get to moments where I get my dates all mixed up, but I like to say that I've been involved for well over 11 years because of Jeff bringing his beer for us to try.
Sure.
I was helped with organize volunteers for the grand opening party, I think January of 2011. Mm-hmm. We went and helped bottle back then. And so was involved for quite a bit. And volunteered, I think, in the tap room, as I've done in many breweries here in Austin. But then I floated away. I was involved in opening Black Star Co-op, a cooperatively owned brew pub here. And so I kind of was helping with other local brew pubs and breweries, just sort of the part of giving, being involved in the community and giving. And then there was a time where I was underemployed. And so I went to the general manager, who was a volunteer for me at the Austin Reggae Fest and then at beer events, and he'd been a volunteer for me at the opening. But he had stayed with and became a manager. And so I went to him and said, "Hey, I'm calling in that favor. I really need a job. Will you hire me?" And he's like, "Sure." He's like, "Yes. Yeah, yes." And so I started working from the house probably about 7 years ago at Jester King. I worked at the front of the house for several years, and then started doing tours, and then also supporting social media and website, just kind of as extra things that were needed. And then 2 years ago, when we had everything shut down, I kind of stepped away from the front of the house, obviously. And so the last about year and a half, I've been doing a lot of social media marketing and community engagement. However, I'm glad we hired someone recently full-time because, again, as I said, portfolio career. So I have a primary job during the day, and I have Jester King that I work on the weekend and the evenings support as well.
Mm-hmm.
So my role as community engagement coordinator is to both do on-site experiences, so our brewery tours, our goat experiences where you get to hang out with our goats, guided tasting and tours, educational opportunities, but mostly community engagement both through off-site events as well as our Jester King Volunteer Corps, which is where we go out in the community and we support local nonprofits and programs by bringing together our staff, our guests, our family and friends to go out and to help give back to the community that has supported us for over a decade.
Love that about the craft beer industry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited to have this role because I was really just so impressed. My first trip to Boulder and going to Odell and seeing what had been put in place there at Odell's and how much the staff and the company supports nonprofits and the local community.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's wonderful that we put community concern. Community concern is a core value at Jester King, mm-hmm. and it's concern for one another. It's for our community. It's for our industry.
Sure.
So yeah.
Going back to, and I have to ask this question. John probably knows what I'm going to ask. Going back to the tours, mm-hmm. What is the stupidest question you've ever gotten on a tour? And the reason we asked that is we had the tour manager, Lindsay from Allagash on, and she was once asked, when do you add the alcohol? So that was her favorite. So you have to have had a favorite real stupid question on a tour.
I'm going to say that I can't think of a stupid question. I really can't.
Oh, good.
I tell, in fact, if anything, I tell people there is no stupid question because I'm in the wrong place if I think something is stupid that someone asks me, because it is an opportunity always
to educate somebody.
To educate someone.
Sure,
yes,
absolutely.
And I'm going to tell you, I recently was in a situation where I went to an offsite event and somebody was pouring, and I was, and so it's not a tour, but thinking about having someone who's pouring. So they're used to pouring dome foam. These are people who are used to pouring beer after beer at the mm-hmm. Texas State Fair. And she would ask when I would say, oh, well, this is here, here is our bitter death. And I would describe it, it's like terrible, this and that. She said, is it light or heavy? Well, what do you mean? Is it light or heavy? And I'm like, what do you mean light in alcohol, calories? She's like, no, like a Heineken versus Guinness Stout. And I had to stop and check myself and realize I need to answer this woman in a manner that she will feel that she is taking something away and learning from it. And that woman was so receptive and this was a Friday night, and she was so receptive to this knowledge. And I can tell you, everyone that was in that work crew, they didn't have the beer knowledge that we do. But that next day, I was like, can I have her again? Because once I worked with her, once I gave her like here's a difference. And she tried something, and she even tried one of our beers. She's like, I'm kind of getting a little vinegar out of that. And I was like, you have a sensitivity for acetic acid. Mm-hmm. Because yes, there will be a little in this beer. She was right. There's a little residual, little perceivable, low threshold of acetic acid. So that's I have to say that. Yeah, you get questions from time to time, but usually it's not the ones that I don't think they're stupid questions. I think I'm stupid that I don't know the answer, because someone asks a question like, why hadn't I thought, it's like, why did I not know the answer to that question? I should know the answer. So
that's fair enough. I could have phrased it the funniest question you ever got.
Yeah. No. That's, and I get it, because it is where I feel that we've went through this time, we've changed quite a bit in the industry. We have been a brewery that for a long time had people coming out that were seeking wells, that were buying beer to go and exchange. They weren't actually drinking it. And then that meant that beer was bought up and it wasn't accessible to just anybody. Mm-hmm. And now I really think there's been a major sea change that just that craft beer, it's no longer a trend. It's a movement. It's here to stay.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so it behooves us for the industry to kind of, you know, and again, I mean, I'm not trying to judge anybody who says, oh yeah, that's a stupid question. Cause yeah, I would be going, because you know what, when someone says, when do you have the alcohol? Then that's when I realized I wasn't effective. And this is me personally. If somebody asked me a question, then I wasn't effective in how I delivered that. So I try to always make sure that, because I'm going to tell you what, I didn't pass. I was trying to interview for our tour program. It took me 6 months to qualify. And part of it was because I was being too technical. And it was a moment where I just let go. I wasn't nervous. And I wasn't trying to over-explain anything. And then just realized at the core of it, I'm just a storyteller. And I just want to engage people and create that dialogue. And that's when I was able to feel more, because it is the idea of the hardest part is assessing your audience. Yep. Like, do you have people who are pro brewers, home brewers, or the people who walk out and go, well, I don't even know what malt is, or I doesn't get to see what malt is, right? So yeah. Gotcha. Yes, I'm passionate about that, obviously.
No, that's awesome. That's a great way to look at it.
We've got a great comment on that.
Yeah, Annabelle Luna, she wanted to say that's a really good approach. She's as a new home brewer, I ask a ton of questions, especially beer vocabulary when it comes to tasting. So that's an awesome approach.
Now, where are you brewing, Annabelle?
Hold on 1 second. She also did say before. She said craft beer and bourbon are their hobbies too. So.
Where are you based out of? Because you sound like a woman after my own heart.
There you go.
Yeah, so it's like, where are you from, Annabelle? Annabelle. Maybe we can hook you up with a home brewers group.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
There you go. Oh, San Antonio.
I actually won an award at the Cerveza Fest for a clone I did of a Jester King beer.
Nice.
San Antonio.
Did you have a little inside information on that, or
no? This is
before you worked for them.
Before I went to Jester King. Nice. Oh yeah, because before I was like, I don't like Belgian style farmhouse beers. Why would I want to work here?
That's funny.
We were going to talk about that. We can at some point.
Absolutely. So give us a little history, briefly. I mean, you did tours already. So give us a little brief history on Jester King. So let's talk about that for a second. Okay. They opened back in
end of 2010, early 2011. Colin, fact check me on that if you want. So the history behind Jester King is essentially that we had Jeffrey Stuffings, who moved to Texas. He was in law and decided he didn't want to be in law anymore. He wanted to open a brewery.
We hear about a lot of lawyers that became brewers.
Yeah. There's a few out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you just come in that grind, and he convinced his brother, who was in finance, to come down and help. So I love the fact that Jeff really just came in and firmly entrenched himself and was grounded in the home brew community. Because keep in mind, nowadays there are a lot of breweries that have opened where it's maybe someone's in tech or some other industry or engineering, and they've not homebrewed, but they've got a good sense for business, or they want to create a business, and then they hire the right people, and they help. So there is that kind of approach, right?
Sure.
But Jeff pretty much was like, we want to know how to do this. We want to make sure that I'm doing it and doing it right. And so he was looking to open a brewery, and the property that the brewery sits upon, the owner of that property said, hey, I'll lease you some property to build it. And so that's when we first started out in a small footprint, and then gradually bought acreage around it, and then more acreage and more, and then the restaurant, event hall, inn. So now we have over 165 acres.
Oh, awesome.
In the Texas Hill Country.
165 acres. That's great. That's so great. Love it.
I almost got to go there a couple of years ago because my son was in San Antonio, basic training for the Air Force. Mm-hmm. But in the middle of basic training, everything got shut down for COVID, so couldn't go for the graduation. And visiting Jester King was on that itinerary. So I missed that opportunity.
That's good. The plan is actually for me, I will more than likely be there a year from March. this March, a year and so 13 months from now.
Yeah, San Antonio, Austin is on my itinerary. It's on my list of places I need to get to.
Yeah, taking a.
Yeah, I think the difficult choice for you would be where to go, because I think there's some stellar breweries that have been around for quite some time. There's some wonderful little gems here and there in brew pubs that I always say, it's like, yeah, you can go to this brewery because they'll always have quality beer. If you like hop forward beer, go here. But it's like, get yourself to the Brewtorium and get yourself to Holdout Brewing, these wonderful just places where they have a wonderful brew, beer and food, and the community and the people there is just so engaging. And they're
when we
at work.
Yeah, when we hit it, we know who to reach out to for advice.
There you go.
And I'll send you some distilleries and wineries too.
That's awesome too.
And the question of which ones to go to, the answer is always all of them.
All of them, yeah. As many as you can get to in the time you have in town. And
still walk away with your liver intact.
And walk away, yeah, exactly. All right. Let's any new beers? Obviously, we talked about the fact that Jester King has now gotten into lagers. They got the horizontal lagering tanks. They made the you were drinking the Helles Munich style Helles before. Anything else new on the horizon, beer wise, events wise, anything like that before we move on to?
Always so much. I mean, beer wise, I do love the fact that this brewery was always intended to be a farmhouse style brewery, which I will say, farmhouse is not a style, it is not a category. Mm-hmm. It is philosophy, it's approach, it's about letting nature take its course. And then again, it's not the Wild West. Yesterday I made a comment.
No pun intended with Wild West, right? No.
Yeah. Well, I was judging this weekend at the Texas Beer Cup, which is the Texas Craft Brewers Guild, that just inaugural competition. And there was, one of those kind of specialty beers. And I just said, I'm reminded my mantra, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And one of the other judges is like, wait a minute, you're saying that from Jester King? I'm like, well, yeah, because just because it's a sour ale doesn't mean that there's not still some guardrails that you have to have on there. And I think there's a kind of a misperception about, we know that if we're using our own organisms that are bioprospected from our land, we still want to have a palatable beer, and then we know that we want Brett and we want Brettanomyces and Lactobacillus to be the forefront. But we know Acetobacter and Pediococcus, they're still there. I say, you want these guys to be your star performers. You want Acetobacter and Pediococcus to be those understudies back in the wings that never get to see the spotlight. But they're still going to be there as long as you're not just buying yeast, buying your Brett and your Lacto from a lab, right?
Right.
And I think there's this misperception that farmhouse or Jester King beers means that anything goes, and that's not the case. But all the beer we make is with water from groundwater well right there on site. So even when we're doing a nice classic style like the Helles, this is with the water is softened in this, but we're still using Weyermann floor malted Pilsner malt, Augustiner yeast in this. I love the fact we made this wonderful bitter death. It's kind of like we love Terra Bulbus. It's a favorite beer of ours. So this is the Belgian Pale Ale, but yet the grain in it is all Texas grain. So we tried to create that sense of place by using Texas malt when we can, which is coming from Texas farmers. Mm-hmm. So that's what I look at when I see that we're expanding our portfolio, but making really well-crafted beers. Coming on the horizon, Doom Forge Day, Sunday, March 20th. Okay. And that's when we'll be releasing our big Imperial Stouts for the year. We just had Spawn Day in December when we released all of our spontaneous fermentation beers that were packaged, that were blended. If you're not familiar with our Spawn, this is essentially where we do spontaneous fermentation beers like method in the method of the Goose and Lambic producers of Belgium, and we'll blend together 3 years. So it's 1 year, 2 year, 3 year old spontaneously fermented beer.
Nice.
Kind of like a goose, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And how good were they?
Oh, they're so good. I love the plum Malbec. We have an amazing one that we used Texas Mexia plums from Lightsea Farms, and then some Malbec grapes from Washington State, and it's just so exquisite, so beautiful.
Oh,
So beautiful.
Sounds awful.
Yeah,
I think I have enough gas in the car. You want to take a ride in a little while?
Yeah. We put my sock. I took my socks off. I'm going to put them back on.
Put them back on. We'll as soon as we're done with the road. Yeah.
Be there about 22 hours.
Exactly. So, all right.
Unless you let me drive, we'll be there in 19.
If we're 22 hours if I drive, 8.5 if you drive. So, all right. Before we move on to a couple other things.
Yeah, I saw you reach for your second beer.
Yeah, I'm thirsty. So what are we?
I'm almost done with my second.
You're almost done with your second. What was your second? I'll throw it up on there.
Yes, I didn't want to interrupt because Debbie was telling a wonderful story. Again, I stayed with Finkel and Garf.
Mm-hmm.
And I went with Brewers Blend.
The Brewers Blend?
Brewers.
You went with the Brewers Blend, did you?
Brewers Blend. The Brewers Blend. It's just read the damn screen.
There you go.
Imperial Stout. It's 10.2. And apparently it is already packed. The ABV soaks right into your tongue, so you can't speak.
There you go. Apparently.
And there's no silly jokes on this one. So all they've put on here is that it's 15% barrel aged Imperial Milk Stout. Mm-hmm. 15% bourbon barrel Imperial Stout, so that's mixing both of our hobbies there, Annabelle. Mm-hmm. 70% Imperial Milk Stout. So they put a couple of, they blended a few barrel aged stouts with their Imperial Milk Stout.
There you go.
And this has got some, it's got some booze behind it. It's not, you get always when you bourbon barrel age, you'll get like kind of that boozy flavor to it, but not the sense of booze. This has got the boozy flavor and also a sense of booze.
There you go. Can't wait to get mine. I ordered them 2 days after he did, so I should have mine in a couple of days.
Yeah, you should.
All right.
You didn't do yours on air.
I didn't do mine on air, yeah. And then I ate afterwards, so it kind of fell by the wayside for a couple of days. All right, I will open mine. Deb, you open another beer?
While you open yours, I'm going to contact my beer steward, or can I pop out and grab my beer real quick?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it while I open mine. You got it.
It's probably faster for me to get than ask
you have an in-house beer steward. I like that.
There you go. That's great. There you go. All right, I'll be drinking Winter Daydream from King Brewing right over here in Ocean, New Jersey.
It's a hypnotic can.
It's a hypnotic or hopnotic?
Oh, no. That's another brewer.
Yeah, but they're okay. They're not gonna get mad I said that. So
no, you wouldn't.
It's a very hypnotic can. It is. What you call it? It's 7.2% Doppelbock, and again, just like the Tame Pivo that I had on the show a couple weeks ago, it's a 19.2 ounce can.
Yes, you got a big sucker there.
I got a big sucker here. Yes, I do. So it's a gorgeous looking Doppelbock. So I'm going to pour this and then take the.
And that's King Brewing out of Ocean, New Jersey, people.
King Brewing out of Ocean, New Jersey, people.
8 minutes from John's house.
8 minutes from my house. There you go.
Everything's 8 minutes from John's house.
There you go.
Was it 8 miles?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. 8 minutes, 8 miles. Except you're not 8 miles or 8 minutes from my house.
No.
So there we go. That is a gorgeous Doppelbock right there.
What a pretty glass too.
That's very and you can't see it because again, that's why ink on glasses has to be white, so you could see it against both, straw colored beer and stouts or dark.
Okay.
It's too.
I love that shape of glass. I've got a Civil Society in that shape.
Yep. This is actually Two Rivers from.
I actually have
Eastern Pennsylvania.
I actually have a Jester King Teku, but as like most of my other favorite beer glasses, you know where it is, John, right?
I know where it is.
It's in a box in storage.
Yes, it is. There you go. Leon Cooper just commented, 6 minutes from where I live in Neptune. Nice.
Yes, it is.
Lived in Neptune.
Yes, Leon and I have been to Kane together.
There you go.
There was a picture of us when he still had hair.
What would you grab, Deb?
I have not had this yet, but this is Weathered Souls Hardwood Classic German Pilsner. I had to get this one for you guys because it's Hardwood Classics and see the basketball kind of thing. So this is
he's got basketball playing over his shoulder there.
Yeah, it's a classic German Pilsner, 4.9%. Crisp, refreshing, lightly hopped, crisp, refreshing. So Marcus Baskerville rolled by recently and dropped this off. So nice. I realized at this end, I was torn. I'm going to do this one now because I also happen to find that he also sent an Imperial Texas Brown style brown ale.
Oh, there we go.
I figured that would be my Finnet closer.
There you go.
Like literally closer. But
you're going to force me to go to 3 beers, aren't you? Okay. Twist my arm.
There you go.
I mean, might be, I don't want to make you.
Consider I just finished my second.
Consider you just finished your second. I think you're already going to your third. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a little water between 2 and 3.
I think you should. All right.
Yeah, there's a 10.2, and number 3 is probably a 12%er.
You're saying, just so you know, Deb, I got a 7.2% Doppelbock from King Brewing. Nice. It's a beautiful beer. It's really good.
I feel like
Doppelbocks.
No, I don't feel like I need to go to a lager. You guys are representing lagers nicely.
We got the lagers nailed down, so you can feel free to drink whatever you want, Dave. So, there you go.
See now, I will say I'm from Houston. I moved here in '93, so I grew up with Houston Astros and the Houston Rockets and the Houston Oilers.
the
Oilers. Yeah.
Bum Phillips.
Yeah. Sure.
Oh, dude, that's old. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, we ain't young.
And Earl Campbell, yeah.
Earl Campbell, sure.
And who was the guy that had all the stickum on his hands and could catch a ball that was like 3 feet away from him?
Jeez, who was
that wide receiver? What was his wide receiver? I can't remember his name. John, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah. I was reading Brandon's comment. He just said it was go big or go home, and you're already home. So there you go.
That's a damn good point, Brendan.
That's what the whiskey is for in the other room, though.
Right. Exactly.
No, I got a barley one in here, so.
Yeah. There you go. Which we call? Yeah, I actually almost bought an Earl Campbell jersey yesterday because it was posted with the wrong size. So it was posted with my size. Lester Hayes. There you go. Doug Smith just said Lester Hayes. There you go.
Thanks, Doug.
Awesome. Well, now, so I also was going to Astro games when it was all the Killer Bees. So
sure.
Kevin Bass, Craig Biggio. I remember seeing Nolan Ryan when he would get like his, X whatever thousands or 2,000 strikeout, and sure. Biggio, Bass.
Oh man, you bring up John and I are both Mets fans, so when you bring up
when you bring up Nolan Ryan, okay,
we get upset.
He won his first World Series with us, but then the Mets, as they usually do, let people go. But hey, you know what? It's what it is. Now, what you call it? Yeah, Leon just said, don't forget Billy White Shoes Johnson.
Oh, how can you forget White Shoes?
But now let me ask you a question. Do you keep an eye on the Titans, or do you keep an eye on the Texans?
Neither.
Kind of just fell by the wayside.
Where'd you migrate to?
I was a football widow for a long time, so I kind of stayed away from it for a while. But then I will say I dated one or two Saints fans, and I loved going to bars and watching, going to the local Cajun pizza place or to or being in, I forget where I was at. I think it was actually in New Orleans when a game was going on. So I love just the camaraderie, the community, hanging out, watching that. Yeah, that was so. So we'll say the only football I really watch all that often nowadays is the Saints. But I did watch the Cincinnati Bengals a couple weeks ago during the,
And kudos to them. They're in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. No, and the first time in 30 years? Or no, 30 years since they've been in even
playoffs.
Been in playoffs. Yeah.
30 years since they've been in the playoffs. First time they're in the Super Bowl in 33 years.
Wow. Oh, love it.
It's all set for tomorrow night. We're actually I do a sports podcast on Wednesday night. Tomorrow our top 10 list is top 10 Cincinnati Bengals of all time.
Oh, are you going to go by their play or their in-booth commentary.
Well, it could be a little of both. We'll see.
Otherwise, you're going to drop someone right off that list.
There you go. And then
Here's the thing. I am very demonstrative when it comes to watching football, though. I tell you what, because I was at Revolution Spirits just down the street, and Cincinnati Bengals was playing, and I'm just kind of like, oh, you're watching football, and I'm having my cocktail, and then there was that tipping point where all of a sudden I'm just like yelling, and we're watching on a laptop, and I'm just
screaming at it. There you go.
If John friended you on Facebook and you accepted, expect next year when the Giants start to play, you are going to see Facebook demonstrative when it comes to football.
Yeah,
it's quite entertaining.
A little bit with the Mets, but mainly with the Giants. There you
go. A little bit with the Rangers too.
A little bit with the Rangers too, and you'll see a lot of
the
these.
Hockey team.
You'll see a lot of these too.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, love it.
But hopefully that changes. We'll see though. So
we got new GM,
new GM, coach. New coach, and there you go. But anyway, yeah, and I do want to make a little disclaimer here. If if the Beer Whisperer, Mr. Tom Mulvihill, is watching, I'm sorry. I just pulled out that Cincinnati Bengals cap, Tom. Because they did.
He's a Rams fan.
What's that?
Is he a Rams fan?
Is he a Rams fan or is he a Chiefs fan?
He's a Chiefs fan.
I think it's well, either way, because they beat the Chiefs, and if they win in the Super Bowl, they're going to beat the Rams. So, but 6-1. Actually, no, I think you're right. I think he is a Rams fan. I think you're right. I think he is. Anyway, maybe. That would have been interesting though if the Chiefs won, because then it would have been in all Missouri, even though the Rams are back in L.A.
Yeah.
So. All right. On that little bit of sports break.
Yes.
Here we go. By the way, this
is the beer podcast.
It is a beer podcast. The sports podcast is tomorrow. Doug Smith, Tom is a big Rams fan. Now,
yeah,
I was right. Yeah, I was right. He was a big Rams fan. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Doug. You mentioned Craig Biggio before. He actually owns a house in the town just south of me. The next town down. So anyway.
And Johnny, where are you? Which town are you in right now?
I'm in Belmar, New Jersey. He has a house in Spring Lake, New Jersey.
Well, so my heritage is my father's side of the family is Mexican American, and my mother's side is German American. Mm-hmm. They're from Newark, New Jersey.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So my great grandfather. My mom made a comment about I don't know. It was only a few years ago where we were talking about, what I was doing in beer. And she's like, well, I'm not surprised you're in beer. It's just in your blood. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, your great-grandfather was a brewer or owned a brewery or whatever. I'm like, what? Why you didn't tell me this? And he didn't actually own it, but he worked as a brewer for George Wiedenmeyer at the New York City Brewery in 1900 to 1918.
Oh wow! I thought you were going to reference Newark, because at one point Newark, New Jersey was it 126 breweries in Newark proper?
It was the brewery capital of the United States.
It was crazy, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was born in Newark, and I actually grew up about 3 miles from Newark.
If you ever make it to New Jersey, you go to Brick City, and they have a map on their wall of all the breweries that were in Newark back in its heyday. And it's mind-blowing.
It is. It's amazing. It's like every other block there was a brewery. You can walk a block and a half, go to another brewery. Walk another block and a half, go to a brewery.
And where I live now, walk half a block, and there is a historic sign up of a brewery that existed half a block away from here.
There you go.
It's now a hardware store.
Yeah, I've been wanting to get over there to do a little research to see if I can to actually try to get in and into archives and stacks to see if I can find evidence as far as the generational in the beer industry there in New Jersey. Because what's funny too is I have a really cool pocket watch, a beautiful pocket watch that I thought was my great grandfather's, and so I was like, no, that was your great grandmother's. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, she owned a tavern, and she had a customer who couldn't pay his tab. This is how he paid his tab off.
Really?
He gave her this beautiful gold pocket watch. I was like, I thought it was like one of the men in the family. I said, oh no, that was some customer paying his tab.
Wow.
So 1900s to have so my great grandfather was 21 in 1900, and he worked as a washerman, I believe. So he would kind of wash the vehicles, which are basically the carts or whatever that they would take the kegs, the beer around in. Mm-hmm. That's how he first started. He started out being like, what is it? And heck, that's all brewing is anyway, right?
Sure.
Professional work. Cleaning.
Yep. Cleaning
Right.
stuff. Yep.
But then he progressed from that. And he wound up becoming a brewer there. That he worked his way into the production side of things.
If you
until Prohibition.
Yep.
If you really want to get into Jersey beer history, we'll talk afterwards. Jeff Linkus really knows a lot about New Jersey beer history. Linkous. He goes. His online name is Beer Stained Letter, and he is a great resource for Jersey beer history.
Sure.
Oh, that sounds great.
We'll talk a little more about that afterwards. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I talked to Mitch Steele a little bit about this story, and because he, his book on IPAs is just amazing because it's so well researched, and it's not just him. He's worked with historians, and I was telling him, I was like, man, Mitch, I'd really love to be able to, how do you get this information, and how did you find the people? And what's funny is he said, well, you know what, you should talk to my wife because she is this ancestry detective. And so still saying, yeah, have Kathleen help you out. But it's interesting to find where you can find this information. So I love the fact that you have someone local who might be able to help.
Yeah, Jeff is a great.
Jeff's resource. A great guy. Mitch is a great guy too. I've had a couple conversations with him. He's tops. He's really good.
I can't wait to get to his new place.
My daughter and her boyfriend were actually at the new Realm in Virginia Beach a few months ago, and they said it was ridiculous. It was just huge.
Yeah, and they have a distillery as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Speaking of which, have either of you been to Sons of Liberty?
I have.
He has. I haven't.
Oh my God, Uprising is just one of my favorite. It's a whiskey that's base beer is a stout. It is fantastic. And before I used to live in Rhode Island for a year, so I visited all the breweries in Rhode Island, and I managed to get a bottle of it while I was there. Went through that much quicker than I'm willing to admit, and didn't realize that they don't distill it all that often. And the rest of the time I was there, it never came back out again.
Right.
Yeah, I love the concept, and it's sad that it didn't. That they wound up. What it is people wanted craft cocktails. They didn't necessarily want this, but just looking at the legacy they create between their beer and their spirits. And I found out about them because they competed in the Whiskeys of the World competition, and so I was essentially lead steward and one of the organizers for that, where we would do the judging here. So I tried one of the whiskeys that had been aged in Pedro Jimenez cast that was just incredible. It wound up winning the award. And so that's what drove me, that then when I was up in that area for Homebrew Conference, I was like, I'm going to Sons of Liberty. And I went in, and as soon as I said Jester King, they're just like, sit down. And because I walked in with beer for them as a gift, and I walked in and they're like, sit down and try this beer. And this beer became this whiskey, which became then aged in Calvados became this. And it just is a lineage is amazing.
I love the community. It's such a great community. It really, really is. And anywhere you go, we went on. Jess and I went on a trip a few years ago, and I just took beer with me too. As gifts for a lot of the breweries we were stopping at, and they couldn't. If I gave somebody 1 4-pack, they gave me a case. I'm like, you don't have to do this. We want to take it home, enjoy it, blah blah blah. So
the whiskey you're talking about that got aged, that's called Battle Cry.
Battle Cry.
Yes.
Yeah,
and they do it in so many different barrels. They do Uprising in a few different barrels as well, but Battle Cry is the one that they really fuck around with more than any of them, because they distill a lot more Battle Cry than they do Uprising. I wish it was the other way around.
I'm so upset that I didn't you didn't get to grab any Uprising at all.
Oh, if I had, I probably would have bought a case of it if I could have afforded it.
So we have a couple.
I would have sent you some money. So
yeah, maybe we'll have to do a gift. Yes, not a trade.
We'll do a gift. Yeah, we'll gift it. Yeah, we'll do it that way. Yeah.
Because here in Texas, please, anyone who's going to go by Sons of Liberty and get some spirits, because here in Texas we have Balcones Distilling up in Waco is making spirits and whiskeys, and they've done a couple of things that they've worked with, like our Imperial with our black metal, and then Real Ale Spirits. Real Ale Spirits came from Real Ale Brewing, and they're making some incredible whiskeys and gins. Again, they're primarily a brewery
You just mentioned John's trigger. You said gin.
You did. So
Oh,
gin is
man.
my. You know what? I mean, gin is. It's other than beer, I drink nothing but gin from. Well, obviously I drink water and stuff like that. But as far as spirits go, I drink from March to November is gin, but December through February is bourbon. You know, I'll pepper in some gin in there. But
I do.
Pretty hard.
I go December
March
through
November.
November with bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
December through November with tequila.
Mm-hmm.
I go January through December with gin.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
Let's see. I go Monday through Thursday with gin, Fridays with tequila, and Saturdays and Sundays with whiskey.
Whiskey. Very nice.
There you go.
There you go.
You realize I just give you 7 days a week.
That's fair enough. There you go.
No, I wouldn't actually.
Most people have socks for each day.
There you go.
I like that.
Socks for each day, drinks for each day. It's all the same. It's fine.
I never liked gin ever. I was like, I do not like this until a couple years ago. Brian Miola from Revolution Spirits came down to Jester King and he brought some bottles of his gin. So Revolution Spirits is just a mile and a half from us. Mm-hmm. And it had juniper, rosemary, lavender, lemongrass, pink peppercorns, and Texas grapefruit pills.
Nice.
And it was phenomenal. It was awesome. It was so good that not only did I start drinking it, but then when he was looking for volunteers to help package, I went over there and started packaging and helping and contracted to package until at some point TABC said, "Oh no, you can't do this. You can't work at a brewery and work at this distillery." And so they basically had to get rid of it.
See, that's funny that they said that because, like in New Jersey, you can't work across tiers, right? You can't work for, but they don't look at it in categories as to what the actual manufacturing is. It's either manufacturing, distribution, or retail. So you can't work in a bar and at a brewery. You can't distribute and work at a distillery, that kind of a thing. But you could work at 3 different distribution companies, 3 different retail outlets, 3 different manufacturing things. So you can work at a distillery and a brewery.
Well, we have a.
It's not a different tier. It's the same tier.
Now, you just take another sip of water. Go ahead. Yeah, you.
Well, I don't have any.
Because we got a logo on that bottle.
Oh yeah, Segway.
Yeah,
and there you go.
There we go. Right. We got the pink boots going there.
There you go.
You got a bunch of stuff on there. Pink boots.
So there's a day job representing with the technology stuff. But yeah, Pink Boots, Master Brewers Association of America. Oh, and of course somewhere is the because I'm a member also of the American Society of Brewing Chemists.
There you go.
That day job is doing tech stuff. There's a bit of related stuff.
Very nice.
Yes, as I said, portfolio career. I'm not married. I don't have kids other than my fur babies.
Gotcha.
So it allows me the opportunity to really just balance out my interests and have my passions and obsessions. But yeah, Pink Boots. Been involved. I founded the Austin chapter, I think 2012.
Well, explain to everybody what the Pink Boots Society is.
So Pink Boots Society is a nonprofit organization that supports women in fermented beverage industry through education. And when we say that, initially it's been getting funding, providing funding and scholarships for women and female identifying individuals to attend courses, brewing courses, for a while we had a trip to Germany that people could go on. And I'd say in the fermented beverages is that it was first started by Terry Farndoff many years ago, 15 years ago now, to be an organization for female brewers. And she very quickly found there weren't a lot of female brewers. And so expanded it to other women in the industry. And then November of year ago, November, so 2020, we then expanded to include other fermented beverages. So mead, wine, sake, distilled spirits. Because there's a lot of crossover. I mean, you do see, like, for example, at Jester King, yes, we make beer, but we also have been making wine and cider. And then often you see women that maybe, and we've had brewers who've gone on into winery. And so and we say about education, it is to empower women in the industries. So education isn't necessarily just technical in nature. It may be something like business planning. It may be HR. I think something that's really important is to recognize that we're all part of the success of a brewery or a distillery or a winery. And so it's something, again, when I talk to Jester King about sense of place and helping people understand that when we talk about the people, it's not just about the brewer, because we know that there's connection there to the Texas maltsters, the Texas farmers. We know that our front of the house staff they're in the front line when it comes to, is your beer good? Has it been kept well? So that the sensory analysis, the QA/QC aspect of it doesn't have to be somebody who's had, the whole lab training. It's simply somebody who's sitting there and serving that beer every day to someone, and maybe going, "Yeah, I'm getting better notes" or something. So, and that's a big thing I think that's important, not just with Pink Boots in reaching more women to get them into the industry, but also I think that it behooves business owners to recognize that, again, their front line are the people who are pouring the beer and serving it to.
Well, there's also has been that stigma in the craft beer industry that it's male dominated, and that you get some of the, let's say, toxic masculinity going on where they think women don't know anything about beer. And I've witnessed this firsthand, and it's asinine. It's absolutely asinine. For one, women tend to have a more sensitive palate than men do. That's a scientific fact right there. And to just assume that a woman doesn't know about beer is really just childish, absolutely childish.
Or just because a woman's not on the brew deck doesn't mean that they don't know about beer.
Right, but that could go for any gender not being on the brew deck. They don't know anything about beer, yeah. But it's more sensitive for women, though.
Yeah,
absolutely more sensitive.
When we talked about that, I had somebody say that to me, a fellow judge.
We talked about that yesterday. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So what happened was somebody said to me that we were critiquing a beer because we're trying to come to consensus, and so I've got a brewer on either side of me they've both been brewing for probably about a decade, and someone said, well, if you brewed, and I just looked at him, I was like, I'll let you get away with it the first time. After that, we're going to have a fight, because it is that. Yes, I understand there's a lot. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say I'm getting off flavors such as this and then turn around and and in this is a pro competition. I'm not going to say check your temps or make sure you're not over sparging, or because I may not know the subtleties of the process, because no, I'm not doing this on a daily basis. But I know enough to try something, go, yeah, not getting it. This does not have this grain bill is not right. The OGs, the gravities are off for this style, and I can at least be confident in what I'm presenting. And I will say that he kind of laughed, because the funny thing is, I can say that to him because before he started that brewery, I remember when the owner of that brewery walked into a bar for the first time, put his growlers down, and was like, "Hey, will you try my beer and try to sell it?" So that I've been around long enough to know that. And the other person had been the first brewer at the cooperative brew pub that I helped to open, where I hired the first couple of people. So it is the fact you need your operations people, you need your HR to have a successful business. And the guys were like, they thought it was funny, and it was great, and because we're friends as well.
Right.
But still, not all women are going to have that kind of feel that they can push back or speak voice, because
sure, yeah, no, a lot of them aren't going to.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I found myself saying, for a moment, I said, "Thank you for allowing me to participate in this." I'm like, no, I don't know to say thanks for allowing me. Yeah. I earned my spot here.
Sure, absolutely.
But it is that women having that confidence in themselves. And like Annabelle, you better still be there, and you do, and you push back.
Yeah. I'll throw up. She just commented too. I'm going to throw that up really quick too. She said she chairs a committee on the board of the San Antonio Cerveceros called Juntos. Their focus is creating a safe place for more women to learn about beer. They've done classes with Paige Martin from Second Pitch and Mara from Community Cultures. They're trying to make changes.
Community Cultures is fabulous. We've worked with them. I love Mara. She's incredible. Community Cultures is a yeast lab out of San Antonio, Texas. And they both produce cultures for pro brewers as well as for home brewers, so that you can get their product. And what they do is they have some beautiful, fabulous pure culture strains that we've actually worked with. When we did our Pink Boots collaboration brew at Jester King, we've used one of hers, I think, a year or two ago. But she and her husband also go around the state of Texas and they do the bioprospecting. So they've gone to West Texas, to Chihuahuan Desert, and gone and harvested off of Ocotillo and off of, it's prickly pear cactus to get these native Texas cultures that are fabulous. But I'm so excited to hear. It's always wonderful to hear this, with the work being done out there, because frankly, craft beer, I always say craft beer is not meant to be exclusive. It's meant to be
inclusive. Absolutely.
We wouldn't have such a, if we didn't have diverse palates, if we didn't have diverse people contributing to it, forget it. Let's just drink a crappy American light lager and call it a day.
Well, what did Michael Jackson say? It is the greatest social lubricant, right?
Yep.
And that's actually, I use him anytime that someone says that someone who doesn't brew doesn't know anything. I'm like, Michael Jackson wasn't a brewer, and he was one of the foremost leading experts on beer for quite a number of years.
Absolutely.
So he's a great example for that as well as a great source for quotes.
Quotes are great too.
And pictures of a dude in tweed and elbow patches.
Exactly.
You know what that is? It's a word. This word that I came across, again, half heritage Mexican American, half German American, is Gemütlichkeit. And Gemütlichkeit is a German. It means geniality and friendliness. And it is this approach that when you go into like a beer stube in Germany, when you go to the Zeugelstubes, it is about walking into some place and sitting down and having beer and having food and engaging with other people.
Right.
You don't have to know a thing about beer. You don't have to be a brewer. It's a whole concept behind a Stammtisch. But the fact that Michael Jackson recognized that and he put that forth about the social lubricant is the idea of coming together and enjoying beer and
exactly. It doesn't matter what level you're at and whatever you're doing, even if it's food related, it doesn't matter. Everybody's coming together and exactly.
What's interesting is, and I've said this many times, I haven't said it on the show yet, is a lot of times you'll get a bunch of craft beer nerds together.
And there's not a lot of things that he hasn't said on the show yet. I just
this is true. But you get a lot of craft beer nerds together, and you're always going to eventually have someone that knows a little bit more than the others. And you know they're true craft beer nerds because the other ones shut up and listen. They listen to the person that has the knowledge because they want the knowledge. And you see that in the craft beer world. You don't see that in the sports world. Everyone knows more than everybody else. It always turns into an argument. And watch John's podcast tomorrow and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Usually it's within the craft beer world. It's I want to learn more. I want to know more. You know more than I do. Let me listen. Of course, you have your exceptions to that rule, the people that think they kind of know everything, and we've run across them.
Oh, there's a handful of them out there, and we all know who they are. But we're not going to give any initials or anything like that because there's no need. Everybody knows who they are. So
well, and this brings up a good point. What I said earlier about that fellow judge who was very open about that. We got to a particular beer. And he's like, I don't like this hop. I don't know this beer style. It's not something I brew or tried. And I sat there and I said, well, let me tell you about it. And when I spoke to him, I didn't say, well, let me educate you about this. It was, I know that you just said that you don't like that hop, and understand that hop wasn't actually in the original recipe of the style, but then the originator liked it so much he changed it. And this was about Italian Pilsner and the fact that
Oh,
Safford wasn't the original hop in there.
No.
But as soon as Matt Brindleston of Firestone Walker made Pivo Pills and added Safford in it, and then the originator in Italy had it, was like, wow, this is great. He changed that recipe. So it is the idea of and that's one of the discussions we kind of got into a little bit about Americanized versions and the idea of like what certain beer styles that you go, well, is this how it's supposed to be? Are we judging this by classic standards? Are we judging this by the Americanization of it? And so for him, I was able
Fair
to.
enough. That's a good question. That's a good.
yeah, we've Americanized every style, right?
Sure.
Well, we talked
Almost.
about it. Look at the fact that that's so true.
Yeah.
Um,
But what did you? I mean, what is the criteria though? I mean, do you judge it on the classic style? So putting Saffron in it is not. So it's not your classic Italian pills, obviously. But so does it lose for that, or does it?
Doesn't matter
or is
how
it
it was
based on
entered.
how it tastes. Does it? Yeah, exactly.
I would say that in that instance, you take a step back and you say, is this a well-crafted beer? Is it balanced? And then kind of, again, you have that discussion, because it is a matter of, is it a little too much? Because again, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And part of that is don't overhop something.
I've never lived by that.
It's like, because here's the way I see it. The issue with hazy, with the whole issue with like hazy, juicy IPAs, it's just like making hot sauce. It is the idea
Funny
of
you
that.
say that.
It's about thinking about Scoville units and the fact that, I would make a hot sauce with the best Scoville, the highest Scoville units.
Yeah, but
Does
it
it
has no
taste
taste.
There's
Does
no
it have
taste. It's just
You put it on your food. With an IPA,
you might as well just have just pour capsaicin over the entire.
plate, exactly. And so I see the same thing with a lot of hazies and juicy, and the idea of, do you at least make sure you've got a strong malt foundation for those hops to hold up against, or are you just sitting there just trying to throw all the hops and all the IBUs at it, and you're just creating this unpleasant. I mean, frankly, that's why I tend to stay away from a lot of those, because I want to be able to have a pint of beer if I want to have a pint of beer. But right now it's going to be a lager or a Pilsner. It's going to be it's going to be a lager, because it's supposed to be a Helles or a Kolsch or whatever else, because I don't, a lot of those hazy IPAs, it's just, you get a point, I'm like, I can't do it.
You can't, right? Exactly.
They get tiresome. They wear your palate out.
Well, on that note, let me ask you this. We talked about this, so we foreshadowed a little bit. What's your, I want to, let's do it this way. Let's switch it up.
Stop overthinking this.
No. Let's switch it up. We talked about the fact that there's a couple of new, but there's a lot of rediscovered styles out there. Okay, and you had mentioned to me that you're loving it, and I'm loving it, and Dave's loving it. So let's talk about that. Give us your take on it, because anybody's listening has heard ours already. So,
okay. So first, well, we'll get back to that. Well, I'm gonna bring this up because I think this came up with your discussion with Joe David last week, was it or so?
Sure. Yes,
and that is, I always was a self-proclaimed hophead for a really long time. And then I never thought I would work at Jester King. I mean, I enjoyed the OG pure culture beers that were being made to establish can we brew a beer and brew it well? Can we build up the capital and now develop our mixed culture? But I was just like, I did not like the toe jam, sweaty blanket farmhouse aspect. I didn't like the bubblegum Belgian estery stuff, right? I mean, like the bubblegum.
Sure.
I didn't. And I was studying for the BJCP exam. And we were tasting through all the different categories. And they're like, yeah, we're going to do Belgians. And there's so many of them. We're going to have to do it on 2 nights. I'm like, this is going to suck. And then somebody and so we would do it, and
Hope Matt's not listening.
No, I think he is actually.
yeah, no. So I was like, this is gonna suck. And I had, of all things, I had a Bourgogne de Flanders and a Duchess, and I don't know if I had Cuvée de Jacobin then. I had it later. But for me, it was like the Flanders were like, bam.
Mm-hmm.
Flanders style is what busted open my palate from being a hop person.
That's a really good style to get you into it.
Absolutely.
And then from then getting on and getting into the nuances of it. At the same time, Jester King was evolving its mixed culture and evolving and becoming this point where, and the way I say it with Jester King beers is you can't take them and line them completely up like here's this, that everything should be well balanced, but you've got Petite Prince on the light end, you've got things like RU55 on this end, but you can't line them up one after another because there's complexity.
No, it's basically 4 dimensions.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, expanse. So we know sci-fi here, but exactly. Going back to the idea of, you asked me about these styles, is that sometimes it's just getting you out of your own comfort zone. Sure. And I always tell people is like, look, I am here to help disrupt your mind about what you think beer is or should be, why you don't like something. Also, and to expand your palate, because I had to do that. I had to expand out of this hop palate to get to Farmhouse, and then also not be and quit being Matt Bernelson came and spoke at the Blue Bonnet competition about hops a couple years in a row, and I was in there front row. This is awesome, exciting. And then he talked about malts. I'm like, boring. Now it's just like I love an Imperial Red Ale, Imperial Stout, Bourbon Age, and that's all about malts. And so so having this own evolution yourself. Long story short, Rausch beer. Never ever thought I would like. I smoked beers, didn't like it. And then I had Auch Shankri-La in Bamberg at the Source.
Oh wow!
Wow.
Yeah, that'll.
To quote a phrase that the kids say, jelly.
Yeah, that'll change your religion right there.
A little bit, right?
Yeah, and coming back and having Grodziskie. This 600-year-old Polish.
The Polish
smoke. It's Annabella's favorite, by the way. She
awesome,
said,
yeah.
"Wow,
incredible Grodziskie."
Because Bamberg gets the credit for smoke beers, but the Polish version is actually older.
Oh, absolutely, that's definitely
by a century, right?
At least, yeah.
Which, keep in mind, though, when I went to Bamberg, that smoked beer was the third beer I drank. Before that, my first beer that I had was a Hefeweizen, and the next book was a wit beer, because you've got Auch Shankri-La, but then you have Ambrosium, a little brew pub there, and then you have the restaurants where you go in and you get a really nice Hefeweizen that's made at a local brewery that you're not going to get outside that region.
Yeah,
and so the Grodziskie, the smoked beers, I think that Doppelbocks and Marzens and that they're really underappreciated.
Not in this group. But also the British styles that are starting to come back, like your bitters, your milds.
I had just to name a few. Dave just said English milds or whatever. We were in Pittsburgh in July, and Grist House Brewing. I don't know if you've ever had anything from Grist House in Pittsburgh, whatever. They made a beer called London Crawling. It's an English mild. It was probably one of the best English milds I've ever had. It was really well done. ESB's Treehouse, a brewery that's known for hazy IPAs, making nothing but haze and juice, right?
Oh, they're lagering the hell out of it now.
Tremendous. They're lagering everything. They did an ESB that was amazing.
And the thing that's coming back right now that John and I are crushing on, and some others in our circle, Tomave Pivos.
Tomave Pivo, yeah. The dark check lagers, and there's so many. Literally in the last 6 months, I have had more Schwartz beers and dark check lagers, Tomave Pivos, than I've had probably in the last 7
years prior, maybe years.
Yeah. It's just in the last 6 months. It's amazing that everybody's adopting them now, and and they're making them very well too, and they're really good. So I'm loving every minute of this rediscovery of. They're still making. Obviously, they're keeping the lights on and paying the bills with the hazies, right? But they're making all of these other styles, and a lot of them obviously lagers too. Some of the males, but it's a beautiful time right now. I'm loving every minute of it.
You realize though that one of Jester King's first beers was Commercial Suicide, which was essentially a British mild, and the reason it was called Commercial Suicide is that people are like, you're going to make a beer that's only 2.9%. I forget exactly what it was. It's like, yeah. And so it is the fact that people didn't want to buy it, because we're talking about several years ago when people wanted booze for their bucks.
Sure.
But guess what? One of the beers we just released, I think we just released it today, is Colonel Toby. And this is a beer that we had brewed in collaboration with the Colonel Brewery in London, which is it's a hobby little farm beer, 3.8%, and that we made this, but it's brewed with it's British, it's a British influence beer. They're making it with our own Melwater, Wildfire Pale Malt, and San Jacinto Row, which is right here from here in Texas, but then using Hallertauer, Mittelfrüh, and Tettnanger and hops in that as well.
Well, we have a brewery in Jersey. Is now re-releasing a beer that they originally produced. There was a Schwartz beer that they made called Black Wheat. It was their best beer, but it didn't sell. They found out that they could go to the hazy IPAs and the pastry stouts
and sell a lot more beer by
and
doing
make a lot
that.
more money.
So, yeah,
but now I think they've recognized that the trend now is towards the lagers, and so they're bringing back this Black Wheat. And I applaud it. That it's coming back. I don't applaud the reasoning behind it. They should have been making it the whole time. If they
should have never stopped making the damn beer.
Yeah, they should never, because it was the best beer.
Make small batches. Just put it. Just keep it on.
Yeah.
It was a flagship originally for the brewery, and they opened 6 years ago.
I think
6 years ago. 6 years.
And John knows I've said this before. They became other half wannabes.
Yeah, we've. It's funny because that we're having a discussion because we released 2 English style beers in the last week.
Right.
Beautiful.
At the distillery we have a best bidder, the Meowsenry, that just was released. By the way, my pup's name, she's a Chihuahua mix. Her name is Maris Otter.
That's beautiful.
And then one of my cats is she's named Vienna. After Vienna malt. Also
very nice.
Speaking of Vienna, speaking of Maris Otter, I'm drinking a barley wine right now.
Oh, there you go.
You know there's some Maris in this.
There's definitely some Maris in that. So Maris Otter and Vienna. Now those are malts, everyone.
Yeah, now, from the hophead.
From the hophead, right? Now, on the other hand, from another hophead, what's your daughter's middle name?
Actually, it's her birthday today, as a matter of fact.
Well, that's kind of why.
And Layla's middle name is actually Sylvine.
Oh, lovely.
After Nelson Sylvine.
That's nice.
So Layla Sylvine has a nice lilt to it, so it really worked.
Layla Sylvine, right there you go. So very nice. So. There you go. But yeah, I'm loving every minute of this. It's almost like a renaissance. It really is right now, and I'm really loving.
That's a great word for it. I was trying to find another word for it, like it's kind of a backwards revolution, but I think renaissance is probably a much better name.
I'm liking it a lot. So
I will say I'm really excited to see that the pro brewers are. I say the pro brewers, the pro brewers are really embracing this idea of creating these wonderful lagers, simply because for a long time, I don't know. I mean, I will tell you, the best Kolsch and Helles beers that I had in Texas were coming out of the homebrew competitions.
Sure.
But I can tell you that Kerry Martin right here in Austin, Texas, Jeff Oberlin in Houston, Texas, made these incredible beers, but there wasn't a lot of professional breweries that really were putting that out there. Again, Texas has its challenges. But that's changed drastically. There, like I said, St. Elmo Brewing in South Austin, Carl Kolsch is it is our go-to, ride or die beer. Live Oak, Live Oak makes incredible, and they make Schwartz beer. Then they Grodziski, and so those are just stellar. You want your hops? Go to Austin Beer Works. Make some fabulous. But actually, another beer I think I have. I'm not going to drink it. Maybe I'll drink it. We'll see. They make a fabulous Oh, so I will say I'm torn.
I'm drinking 12% barley one. Drink it.
Awesome Beerworks makes Einhorn, which is a fabulous Berliner Weiss. But what they did is they made like the raspberry lemon
Interesting.
one. It's a tart. Yeah, this is a really fabulous. This is my kind of keep in the fridge all the time beer.
Nice.
But they're really known for making very hop forward beers.
That sounds like a great summer beer.
IPAs in Texas is their Fire Eagle. So,
Nice.
yeah.
So the barley one I'm drinking is another Finkel and Garf.
Another Funkel and Graf.
Funkel and Graf. Yeah, I just completely misspelled everything when I sent it to John before the show. This is actually aged in wheat whiskey barrels.
Wheat whiskey barrels.
Oh,
yes,
interesting.
And it's
by the way, everything he drank on the show tonight, I ordered too. But clearly, since he drank all of them on the show tonight, I get to drink them by myself and not on the show. So I'm not going to.
You can drink them on the next show. Shut up. We've done this before. And what's interesting, the fact that it's wheat whiskey, you are getting that kind of bite that you get from wheat out of it for a barley wine. So imagine this full, Maris Otter barley wine with that leather to it and all that, and then you've got a wheat bite behind it. Mm-hmm. It really makes it's 12%, and that wheat bite that throws in there makes it feel stronger than it really is.
Nice.
But when you start drinking, you realize, no, it's actually more approachable than that. It's just that sense of that bite.
Right. Well, I like that.
I'm enjoying this. This is very well brewed.
Nice.
Yeah, they do some nice stuff there.
What's that?
I am a huge fan of barley wines and imperial stouts. It's just that what they do to me is a little just like, can't quite.
Well, they do it to everybody. So
that's okay. I'll sleep well tonight.
Exactly.
When you work at a brewery that you're drinking beer that can be anywhere between 2.9 and 5.4 generally, then turning around and having barley wine and imperial stout can leave a bit of.
Well, it's funny. You said between 2.9 and 5.4. My 3 beers on the top 3 tonight are all above that. But anyway, before we get to the top 3s, though, a little foreshadowing there. I really want to hear your debate on the whole Imperial IPA versus double IPA, because I got to hear this. I got to.
Which is more correct.
Well, they're two totally different things, in my opinion. And there was a big debate in one of the Facebook groups this past week about it. And the way I understand it, and by all means, poke holes in my opinion on this, Imperial to me always implies that you've got a much heftier grain bill, so that your OG and your terminal and your final gravity are going to be much higher. So, and hence you're going to be higher in alcohol. Whereas the DD, the double things are all about the hops. It's about
the DIPA, as some people say.
The DIPAs, yeah. Mm-hmm. But so the dip, so I think that a DIPA is more about that. But if you're sitting there and trying to get in the semantics of, well, I added hops 3 times during the boil. It's like bullshit. That's standard brewing.
Right.
It is about.
Triple hopped. Yeah. When you make a beer, you triple hop the beer.
Yeah.
You add them at a boil. You add them at the flame out.
Finishing aroma. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's just kind of, I think sometimes, and people can call beer what they want, whatever they want. It just bothers me. The thing that bothers me most, that has bothered me ever in the most about this, is having a beer at a brewery that was called whatever the style was. And the brewer's like, yeah, no, it's not at all the style, but I just wanted to call it that. And what I said to him was, and he was fairly new brewer. I said, but you understand that if you call it an IPA and it's not an IPA, and someone comes in your brewery and drinks it, and they're either going to be influenced to go to another brewery and go, well, how come this IPA isn't anything like that? I said, so in a way, you're kind of like, you're not being a good player and being like, hey, at least and it's like, call a beer whatever you want. Just don't try to call it classic style and go totally off the rails.
Yeah,
we're talking alcohol content, SRM, everything, Sure.
Well, they're just hurting themselves, right? The people are, if somebody's either going to come in and they're going to say that, okay, this is not an IPA, why are they calling it? Or they're going to say this is a very bad IPA because this is what I'm looking for. One or the other. So they're hurting themselves either way. So.
Well, I call out Shiner not being really a Bock all the time. No, they call it a Bock. Is it truly a Bock?
Well, because in
the sense of the word, it is a Bock, but
yeah,
it's a
very approachable Bock. How about that?
Now,
well, it's not a double Bock, but it's not meant to be a double Bock.
Now, to you said to poke holes in your argument versus Imperial versus DDH. And this is not to poke holes. This actually makes support. But the term Imperial was originally lent to stouts, and it was lent to stouts because the Imperial family from Russia, the Romanovs, came to England. They tasted stout. They loved it. They wanted it shipped to St. Petersburg. Now, shipping back in the days was even slower boat than we have now because it's all by sail. So beers would go bad before they got it there. So the Brits were smart enough to know that they had to up the ABV to make sure that the beer survived to get to St. Petersburg. So they became Imperial stouts. Mm-hmm. So then the Imperial IPA stole that from the stout. The British did not brew an Imperial IPA to send to Russia.
Right.
That's an American invention.
Sure. Yeah, right? Absolutely.
So Imperial and double are both American inventions, and it really depends on how you define it. To Debbie's point, do you define it as Imperial or are you doubling the ABV? Are you doubling the hop bill? What are you doubling to get your?
What exactly are you doubling to get to?
And
exactly.
I will say that yes, I would definitely say that. Yeah, I hear you there. That because you're thinking about the idea of that the mythos behind the Imperial and the IPA story and all that is that you wanted something bigger, not just an extra dose of grains there so that you're able to really get a nice higher ABV, but the hops are supposedly supposed to help because hops are antimicrobial in nature, so the beer will last longer. Now, something that Mitch says in his book on IPAs is that it's that some of these beers that got shipped it's not that they were only made to be that way and shipped over for this reason. These beers they had popularity in, there in England. They were having that popularity. They wouldn't have created simply just for that. But no, I totally agree with you that there is going to typically be that extra bit of hops. And historically, when you look at what Imperial Stout, Imperial beers. Yeah, I agree with you, definitely.
Yeah, that popular in England was for IPAs.
Right.
Because most everybody listening knows the story behind IPAs. They needed beer to make the trip around the Horn to India to the soldiers.
Sure.
So they increased the alcohol and the hop content.
Sure.
So that's how those were built.
Exactly. Throw this up really quick, Deb, if you can hear. Annabelle Luna is heading out. She's all right, guys. I have to head out. Cheers. This was great. Thanks. Can't wait till next time. Just want to throw that up there.
Annabelle, thanks for listening.
Thank you for Annabelle for listening. Thank you so much.
Well, I was checking my beer library, and I was looking for my beer library to see if I could find the book that Mitch wrote, because I think it's good that one of my favorite sayings is actually from Bernard de Chartres, who says, "It's only by sitting on the shoulders of giants that we can see farther." So I think it's important that we not and understand my background is science. My degree is in biology, ecology, evolution, conservation. And so the idea of that science is not science if you accept everything as it is and you don't build upon that. Sure. And I think that's the same when you look at beer. And it is that, these sort of challenging, it's not that you're trying to say, oh, you're wrong, or I don't respect what you're experiencing that.
Right.
But I do think that this is how we go and we grow with what we're doing. And so that's what I liked. I just love the fact that it wasn't just, I just think that Mitch's book was very pivotal I think it's a book that just is so, I don't want to say underappreciated. I just feel like more people should read that book.
Yeah,
because
it's a great book.
Because of how informative it is, and how it challenges people's way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny because I'm actually a trained historian.
Oh,
and history is very similar to science. or unless you don't. Remember, history is written by the victors, right? So there's always three sides to a story, right? Their side, and the truth. So anything that I bring up as far as beer history is concerned, there's always questions involved. Like take the Reinheitsgebot, for instance.
I'm so glad you were reading my mind. I want to talk about this.
Because my theory behind the Reinheitsgebot is it is tied into the Protestant Reformation. And it really was a revolution against the Catholic Church. Because when it came out, the main bittering ingredient in beer was gruit. It was not hops. Hops was really not used a lot. And the Catholic Church controlled the Gruit Reich in Germany. So the year after the Protestant Reformation, the Reinheitsgebot comes out, and they mention hops specifically, not gruit, the main ingredient, bittering ingredient in beer. And it fell in line with revolting against the Catholic Church and falling in line with Martin Luther's tenets against having to pay for everything to the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. So I think it had a religious impact as well, and not just beer purity. So you look at history, tie that in.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something that I don't think people realize, is that my understanding is that purity laws, there wasn't a purity law that just came out all of a sudden in 1516.
Right.
They were existing across the centuries in various countries and various regions. Right. And also, I will say, going back to what's not so much what's the stupidest question, but what is one of the worst perceptions people have is that the Bavarian purity law applied to the entirety of Germany, and that it continues to today. Because if that were the case, we wouldn't have rot beer from Nuremberg, we wouldn't have wit beer, we wouldn't have the Hefeweizens, right?
And I'm fairly certain that my favorite Hefeweizen by any means, and one of the best Hefeweizens brewed in the world, is almost 1,000 years old at this point. All right. Sure it was being brewed before Reinheitsgebot came in.
They had an exception, and the Reinheitsgebot was supposedly put out and mentioned malted barley because of the war effort, and that wheat couldn't be used because it needed to be used for bread, right. Which I think is a fallacy.
You think that's okay? Is it about war, or is it okay? So please dispel this, whether it's fallacy or not, because my understanding was that it was possibly kind of geopolitical in nature, that there was a shortage of the other grains, and that
there was a shortage of the grains.
There was a shortage of the grains.
That Duke Wilhelm could essentially go, hey, we're going to charge a premium of taxes on these grains for the food industry. We'll retain barley just for the beer industry. Now that's a bit more of my assumption.
But you're correct.
Okay.
Absolutely correct as far as what was put out there. My assertion is that the Reinheitsgebot became more of a religious attack against the Catholics in Germany, and the Duke was Catholic.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So then the question that you have to prove is, or the thing that you have to spell is, correlation does not imply causation. So
absolutely.
There you go. Right, exactly.
That right?
Hey, listen,
that's why I'm calling it a theory.
Here you go.
Yeah.
I got the DeLorean outside. I'll set the
let's go.
I'll set the flux capacitor, and we'll go back and we'll figure it out.
Johnny, I think it's hysterical you said that, because in my tour, one of the things I do to talk about storytelling is to be a storyteller is when we go into the cellar, I'm like, hey, humor me here for a moment. We're going to jump into the Jester King time machine. I made out a bunch of old barrels from the back. It's like the TARDIS, so it's bigger on the inside. And we're going to go back to thousands of years ago to we know that people are making things like mead, wine, ale, gruit by taking these ingredients and combining together. But they thought, hey, magical intoxicating elixir. There's a stone tablets they found from Assyria. Then fast forward 1516.
Right.
And even in 1516, the purity law is not just about what you can put in it, but it also was you need to have dedicated equipment.
Right.
It wasn't because they knew, oh my gosh, there's these bad bacteria, this or that, because in the 1800s, when Louis came up with germ theory that we actually understood this, right?
Yeah, yeast is not mentioned in the Reinheitsgebot.
Yeah, not at all.
Because they didn't know about it.
But here's the analogy I just wanted to share with you, and that is, so part of my portfolio career is being in the water industry, and I worked for a water treatment plant where we were supposed to fluoridate the water, and I wasn't a big fan of doing that, by the way. But point being is, there was a time where we couldn't fluoridate because we couldn't get hold of the chemical, the hydrofluoric acid, to add to the water, because it was needed in the semiconductor industry, and they could get a premium price for hydrofluoric acid there. The water industry was used to paying this much. So what happened? Because hydrofluoric, this product is a byproduct of making fertilizer. So these guys realized, we're going to tell the water plants we can't sell it to you because they're paying this price. We're going to sell it over here to the semiconductors because they can pay this price. That is the analogy I think about why the Bavarian purity law related to what could be in there existed.
Is that economics?
Yeah, it was economics. It was the economics.
Supply demand.
Yeah, exactly. The economics is that they knew they didn't have to have it for beer. They had other options, but they knew for the food industry they have to have these. That's just my.
That's fair enough.
Yeah,
that's good.
So
like
my theory is almost conspiracy theory, right? Religious conspiracy theory, and then you've got what was published as, this is the easy route. So usually, in most times, that easy route does pan out as true. Conspiracy theories rarely do, but a good chunk of the time, it's something in between.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I will say, in a way, my understanding is, if you think about it, the Reinheitsgebot, it's a food safety law. It's the idea of don't freaking put stuff in the food or make the beer under conditions. But then again, that is what you're looking at, because I always like the fact that people do think, because beer should be pure and chaste and don't add adjuncts. I'm like, that's BS. That's not. I don't think that's at all it.
Don't the Germans pour syrups into their Hefeweizens?
That's true.
And put Woodruff syrup in a Berliner Weiss, right?
Yes. Hello, yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's not. Yeah, exactly. So, anyway.
But speaking of German, I picked up a book I was not looking for. Sure. Is I do want to give a little call out to talking about their Zoigl beer culture. Mm-hmm. It's my intent. I hope. I don't know if it'll happen, but I said I want to write a book that is basically about communal brewing. So it's talking about things like homebrewing and brewing co-ops, but also if you were to say top beer destinations, it's to go to Germany and go to the Zoigl Stubes. This is a place where you can go. It's a culture that could die. You're talking about rediscovering and this and that. Is right. Get your butts when you can actually travel and go to these amazing, incredible towns where you go, and it's people who they have a communal brew house, and you've got the brewer, the communal brew house. If you have a Zoigl Stube, it means that you've actually you have the authority to brew in there. You take it back, you ferment it. When the beer's ready, you then you put out your Zoigl store, and you'll serve food as well. And that's where it goes back to what I said earlier about Gemütlichkeit and as far as hospitality. And these are people that literally, I was there visiting. I've been drinking, going around and drinking the beers, and it's ridiculous the price that you're paying. I mean, just ridiculous. It's so cheap. And I remember going back and realizing I'd lost my glasses while on a trip. And I go back to look for them, and there's the owner. She's like, "Oh my gosh, we found them! Here they are!" But even going in and saying, "I'd like some meats, but I really don't like. I'm not really a big fan of this." But American going, "I'm just not really a fan of this meat. Do I have a choice?" And she's like, "Debbie, like, come here. Busy Saturday night, gets me up, takes me into her kitchen, and shows me the tray and says, this is what, and explains everything there. And she says, you tell me what you want, and I will build you out whatever you want. Meanwhile, staff's coming by, and just the hospitality of the people there, the community that is there is just so it's just so amazing. It's so wonderful. And it is having someone say, oh, yes, I'm working here at my family's Zoigle Stube. Come and see me at the brewery I work at. I'll take you on the tour, but I'm sorry, it's a condensed tour. That was like 90 minutes at Erdinger.
90 minutes at Erdinger.
Condensed. Usually it's 3 hours.
We could
and then go to their little herb fest, and it was amazing.
It's funny you said that it's condensed tour, 90 minutes at Erdinger, and Joe David last week was saying he got the friends
tour.
And family nickel tour at Sierra Nevada in Asheville, and it was the condensed tour, and it was 45 minutes to an hour. So.
But to your point, we could do a whole show on the German beer culture, town to town, and how food is such a large part of it. It's one of the biggest mistakes we make in this country is that food and beer aren't considered hand in hand. People will go to a bar and just drink beer, really not order anything. They're just there to get a buzz on. It's foreign to Europeans, and especially to the Germans.
No, absolutely.
But then there's also that culture of town to town in Germany where every town has its own style.
Right.
And that goes way back to, well before cars, when everything was, transported by horsepower, literally horses. So every town, the brewery, they made this beer and it became synonymous with that town. That's why you have something called Berliner. Berliner means from Berlin. Right. Kolsch means from Cologne. These styles grew up in these towns.
Same thing with food too. I mean, I know it's just like fast food, if you will, or quick food, but like Frankfurters,
it came from
Frankfurt hamburgers.
But I think this is something too. A topic
that
Hamburg
was invented in the U.S. But
I realized this was a topic.
I was joking about a little of that, but.
Yeah.
That might have come up with this discussion, and that is about the idea of intentional living and how it relates to what you are talking about briefly. I know you're talking about passports. And one of the concerns I have about when there are like these brewery passports where it says, here's a beer trail, go along here, is that if it's great to have one where it's like, hey, at your leisure, come through and check these things out. But then I find that if people get these brewery trail passports, it's like visit all these within 1 month and you'll get this, is that then people aren't coming in and relaxing, enjoying, and having this experience. And it is too why I was talking to someone yesterday about how this weekend about why we charge for tours right now, $5, that's it. I said 2 reasons. One is, we had to ramp up. Can we make sure we pay staffing? But secondly, if you've invested money to be there, then that means I have to be there for you. Mm-hmm. And when it's free, people kind of come in and float in or out. Or worse yet, I would do a tour, and obviously I'm a talker. I want to give you an experience. It's 45 minutes. And when people are like, oh, I went on the tour, but it was too long. And again, intentional, this aspect of somebody coming in and being like, I want it quick and dirty. It's like, that's not what we really want you to do at Jester King. We don't want you to come out and just come in and do a quick tour. We don't want the buses coming rolling through and I'm just here to slam some beers and make it to the next brewery or whatever. So same with beer passports. People are trying to drink that one free beer and make on. It is about intentional. I really do feel that Jester King does emulate that idea of intentional living, of coming out, relaxing, having a great experience, walking the trail, listening to music. And, I think in general, most breweries and brew pubs, that's their intent as well. They want people to come in and enjoy their food or enjoy their beer and build community and socialize and go back and create this hospitality. The same thing that we see when I talk about these places in Germany that are at risk of it going to extinction. They almost have before.
And what I loved about hearing you say the Texas brown ale, for America to get to that point where we do have regional styles, the California Common, right, which is Anchor Steam, right? That's the California Common. And to get to that point of what, Germany was at one point, where you have that beer culture along with the food culture that would be a fantastic thing to see.
So add to your wish list when you go to Nuremberg and do the tour underneath the cellars and have the rot beer and have the whiskey as well. I'll find that name.
Yeah, please let me know that.
So
Absolutely.
happy I didn't miss out on that. It was incredible.
And Leon just commented too. He says, oddly enough, he grew up in Frankfurt,
which makes him a Frankfurter, and I always
makes
knew
him
he
a
was,
Frankfurter.
I always knew he was
hot
a
dog.
hot dog. Yeah,
Of course, he's a hot dog. Absolutely. So, whatchamacallit? Okay.
and I relish the next time I get to drink with him.
You relish the next time you drink him.
I'm so glad you guys found me, because I don't know, the backstory is that I think Johnny had found about our Texas Let's Talk Craft Beer Facebook group, which is how many.
Well,
thousands.
Steve.
Well, we've known, Dave has known Steve for many, many years.
Quite a while.
Dave was actually the very first admin for the New Jersey Let's Talk Craft Beer group that Steve set up. Yeah. And Steve's been on the show before. We've known Steve, and Steve had suggested to me to bring you on. So and I'm absolutely glad he did. So
and
he also said, such a blast, you guys. I've done these things before. It's like, I feel so comfortable and just,
Oh, absolutely. I would love to do our top threes now.
Yes, because John usually does not eat before the show like I do, and he's probably starving.
That's all good. It doesn't matter. I've had a couple of really good beers. So let's do our top threes. And I foreshadowed it before Brian's, but obviously anybody that did see the Facebook post, they know what the top three list is. So tonight's top three list is indeed top three favorite Jester King beers. So why don't we let our guest of honor go first. Deb, please give us your top three Jester King beers. And I know this is going to be more difficult for you than for Dave or I, because you've had many, many more Jester King beers than either of us have had. So
yeah, our selection's a little slimmer.
I think it is where people will say, what do you feel are the two or three beers that represent Jester King? And I'm going to tell you, this was not one of my first top ones for a long time. Petit Prince. Petit Prince has been a staff favorite. We talk about, we call it teeter lovingly, having Edward Teeter hands, which is where you essentially take the bottle and you tape it and you don't. But I
love it.
There was a moment where I had a batch and it was so incredible, amazing. That's it. I'm done. I'm converted. And what I love about Petit Prince. It is truly the beer that showcases our mixed culture. It is very light, very approachable. I could have a bottle of it. The Petit Prince is penultimate. If I say there's one you have to have, I would just say have that beer. It's a beautiful beer. And I love Antoine Saint-Exupéry and Petit Prince. The second one that I usually don't tell people when people say, what's your favorite beer, is one that it used to not be very accessible because it was made once a year and it would sell out in a weekend. And that's Atro Rubicite. Atro Rubicite is a fruited sour ale. It's where we've made a Veuve Saison going through primary stainless, secondary in a neutral oak foeder, and then secondary re-fermentation on fresh raspberries. 7 pounds of raspberries per every gallon of wort in our last batch. It is now more accessible because we tripled production on it. So Atro was number 2.
It would have made my list if I had remembered it.
And number 3, number 3 is tough. I'm torn. So I will say, it's Sophie's Choice there. I am ride or die with the OG black metal, but I think that we are really crushing it right now when it comes to our German style Pilsner. I'm thinking that this Helles is incredible. At the same time, what we did with the Bitter Death with this Belgian Pale Ale. So I can't pick a third. I'll give you a time.
John, she must have watched the show. She made a top 3 into a top 7.
She made a top 3. Yeah, that's what we do every week. There you go. So you're going with the Helles or the Pils?
I'll go with our. Yeah, I'll go with our. Oh, it's tough, man. I just had this one tonight for the first time. I'll say Yeah, we're kicking ass on this one. Our Italian Pilsner was really great. I'd say we're rocking it with the Munich styles, with the German style. So yeah.
Loving it. That's great. That's awesome. All right, cool. That sounds good to me. Mr. Samurai, please give us yours.
Well, I'm going to go 3, 2, 1 on here. And eventually I'm going to find, and I'm looking down because I'm trying to find my honorable mention. But I'm going to let that go. So number 3 she mentioned because it is such an approachable beer. I love this beer. They list it as a table beer, which is really an appropriate way to call this beer. It is Petit Prince. Mm-hmm. Or if you've took way too much French through the years, Petit Prince. It's just a wonderful beer. The hop character in it is just, it's wonderful. It's light. It doesn't detract from the base of the beer. And I love it. You can drink this beer all day. It's just a wonderful beer. Number 2 is going back to French, Bière de Miel.
Ooh, nice.
Ooh, this is the honey beer. Miel is French for honey. So anybody who's a fan of Melovino know that Melo is Latin for honey. Mm-hmm. So the French version is Miel. And honey is a hard ingredient to work with if you're working with a beer. Getting it to balance with the malts is not the easiest thing. And I got to go back a second because Le Petit Prince I had at Hunapu. So we talked about just opening up a tap and just pouring the hell out of stuff. And Jester King was one at a couple of the Hunapus. That's where I had it there. But this one was had at it was a place called Van Gogh's Ear in New Jersey, but it was a charity beer share. There was a gentleman in the New Jersey craft beer scene, actually the whole Northeast craft beer scene, Oz Cruz.
Pretty much the whole, yeah.
Oz Cruz, he did charity events, and all of his charity events, usually about 90% of them went towards local animal shelters. And he put on some of the best charity events. And Oz was about 3 years ago he passed, John?
2.
Was it 2?
2.
Was it only 2? It's pre-COVID.
But I think it was actually during COVID.
During COVID, but
no. Yeah, I think it was just pre-COVID. Yeah, just pre. Yeah.
And to give everybody a sense of how well loved Oz was in the beer community in the Northeast, Hill Farmstead put up a wonderful memoriam to him. I'd be really surprised, considering that they considered him family, that most of Hill Farmstead's beers are named after family, that they don't release a beer called Oz at some point, right? Mm-hmm. So, number 1, Correlation. And I'm putting Correlation at number 1 because John's taking my actual number. Actually, it would have been my number 2.
Well, yeah. Well, my number 1 is, yeah.
So Correlation, loved Correlation. It's, the apple, the, what's the herb that's in it?
What's the herb in Correlation, Deb?
Which I'm not sure if which is it? One of our collaborations with somebody?
I don't know. It was apple and something else, but they aged it.
Wow, you just totally threw! Holy crud! That was a deep cut.
Yeah, we actually had this at one of Brian's bottle shares. Correlation.
Wow. Yeah, this was from 2018. It's the first time we'd ever worked with apples.
Yeah,
it's yeah.
What else? Chamomile. It's apple and chamomile, and it's in
Gala apples. It was Texas grown Gala apples, and then it was aged fresh Muscat wine.
Yep.
For over a year.
So this had a wonderful apple flavor to it. It had that. They had the must but a sweeter must than you usually get from grapes in it. This was at one of Brian's bottle shares.
Oh, sorry, I yelled a little bit there, but you got me excited going like, man, I totally forgot about that beer. That's a deep cut.
Oh, it's a beautiful, beautiful
had,
beer. Well,
honey malt and rolled oats and what else was in that? Oh, and the hops were Golding.
Goldings, yeah.
Golding.
That's good.
Because you want to add a little bit of spice to it, but you kind of want the hops to step away from all the other ingredients in it. Brian must have had this in his, because he's got a bunch of stuff in his cellar.
Yeah, I'm very impressed. That was only about, we only packed, I think that's like 18. So some of the smaller runs, that was like 1,800 bottles of that. I don't even know if I had a bottle of that. I mean, I tried it, but good job.
Yeah. Brian nabbed a bottle of that, and I was fortunate.
Brian's been to the brewery, so
yes, I think he brought it back from the brewery, and I was fortunate enough to be at the bottle share where he cracked that puppy open.
Yeah.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Well, and that was not something, I will say again, not everything's going to be a success, and that was one that we were really on the fence about, because when you work with the apples, you can get a bit of sulfur character to sulfur notes come out, and I think it did turn out. We were pretty happy with the way it turned out.
That's awesome.
And so John, myself, our group of friends, when we travel, we bring stuff back where we might bring something back that's indicative of the brewery. Maybe if it's something that no one's ever had, we'll bring back one of their core beers. But more than likely, we're asking, what can I buy today that I can't buy tomorrow? And that's what we're going to come back with.
There you go.
And then we're going to share it with everybody, and and then brag about it later.
Exactly.
I really appreciate that part, because going back to what you said earlier, is it's disappointing when you're in a room full of beer nerds and you have a beer and you go, I've got this beer when I was, at this place, and this is what repping is, and you go to serve it, and someone's like, yeah, I had it. Well, I didn't think much of it. And that's when it takes away from the fun of it. So I'm so glad that I love the fact that you shared the story about this experience you had with correlation, and it being something that was just that creating that sort of persistence of memory.
Right. That's a great beer name.
It's a great name for a book, actually.
That's it. Or a movie, for that matter.
or a band.
Or a band.
Oh, it'd be a good band.
It's a good name. Let's agree on that. There you go.
But that's basically what our bottle shares. I don't want to say degrade to, maybe upgrade to, is we just all try to outdo. Like most beer nerds, we try to outdo each other.
Right. I don't try to outdo you guys.
It's not outdo.
I try to make you happy. Not make you happy. I try to make all of us happy. I try to make it's just something. I don't want to bring a beer that's going to be like something that's in the mix. I want to bring a beer that people are going to, oh, I remember that beer. That's right. Yeah, that kind of thing.
But to step down from that, it's not just the, grab that whale from that brewery, the thing that they'll never brew again, but you also want to grab something that is from their core. If it's a brewery that we can't get in our state, you want to bring one of their core beers. This is what they always have on tap. Put that out there first, then hit them with that one-off or that seasonal.
Sure.
And this is what's always on their tap, but this is where they can go.
Right. Exactly.
So you want to get all aspects of what that brewery can do and what they're about.
Absolutely.
I call it out-Dewberrying it, because Dan and Joel Dewberry's are just the most awesome, zealots here. And they always will bring, for a long time, they would always bring, and like when I would bring something that they'd never had, when Dan Dewberry says, I've never had that before, I'm like, yes, I just out-Dewberry the Dewberries,
The funniest thing is, at these bottle shares, we have this one guy who shows up all the time. He claims to know nothing about beer, but he
claims to know zero about beer.
He makes fun of us all the time because he'll smell a beer, goes
in a joking way, and he'll go,
this got a wonderful nose feel to it. just to bust our balls, but he invariably brings the best beer to every bottle share.
Every single time he winds up with bringing the best bottle. That's fine. I'll give my three really quick. I'll just run through them really quick. Noble King. It's a good beer. It's a good farmhouse ale. It's got a little dry, tart, nice banana nose. It's a good beer.
Is banana nose from what's in it, or is it from the it's esters from the yeast.
Yeast, yeah. What you call it? Funk metal. I love a sour stout. It's such a good beer, and black metal. I mean, how can you not love black metal? So, and black metal being a Farmhouse Imperial Stout, by the way, if anybody.
I was waiting to hear one of you guys say snorkel. Have you had snorkel?
I have not had snorkel.
Okay,
we both said that simultaneous.
Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah. Snorkel is a very polarizing beer, but I think it's people. I will say when I travel, especially when I go up, my favorite, like walking into this is my bar I just walked into is the Blind Tiger in New York, right?
Oh.
And walking
I love Blind Tiger. Please.
Oh my gosh, I love those people. I love Luke and Kathleen, and they're incredible.
Kathleen is great, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going and Susie and all. I mean, every time I walk in there, people are like, "Hey, Deb," hey. I'm like, I only come here once a year for a work trip, and you always everybody. But being there and just walking in, and I feel like Norman Cheers, and I'm walking in, and people are like, "Oh, Jester King." I'm like, "Who the heck are you?" But people are going on, "Did you bring me snorkel?"
It's that kind of bar. It really is.
Yeah, it is. Snorkel, the umami in that, and mushrooms. It's great for us. But this is awesome that y'all have Noble King, man. That's definitely a real. It's funny to say classic, but just the Noble hops, that is.
I mean, it's a solid, really solid, really good farmhouse ale. Yeah. It's got that great banana nose from the esters. It's nice, dry, a little tart. It's really good. It's just really solid beer.
Awesome.
But yeah, so that's there. There you go. Those are my three.
Great choices, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. There you go. All right. Well, look, thank you. I mean, this has been great. Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And thanks to Steve and Caro for suggesting you come on the show. And trust me, you will be back on the show too. So.
I'd love to talk. Definitely more about like what we're doing and where we're going with.
Yeah, definitely.
Not just Jester King, but like a lot of the efforts I'm putting out there right now, working with Lifting Lucy, increasing diversity for Black and Indigenous women of color in the beer industry. Sure. Pink Boots, where we're going, because I do membership engagement outreach. I just had a call today about that. Right. And also, we can always talk about whiskey. Maybe we can bring my friend Dan from Glenmorangie, so we can talk about barrels and beer and barrels and whiskey. Because
Glenmorangie would be great. Yeah, that'd be. I'd like that. That would be a good.
and
I know that.
We'd have the Whiskey Whisperer would very upset if he's not invited to that.
Oh well, if you come on and you bring Dan on, we're going to have to get Tom on. So yeah,
I will get right on that. I will talk to Dan. We'll get that. Dude, you better book a couple hours if Dan's going on too.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to make sure I eat before.
Yeah, so you might want to eat before the show.
Well, especially whatever we're drinking on the show that night, we'll have to be definitely. Prime,
oh my God! You're gonna wait a second. Wait a second.
I do blame him for all of the money I have spent though on whiskey over the years, because it was going to an event that was arranged by somebody named Jester King that I came in, and that's when I went to that moment of. And we can talk more about how Jester King also helped me get into peated whiskey.
Oh, beautiful. Absolutely.
John?
Yes.
So our next show is February 8th, correct?
Our next show is next Tuesday. Yes, February 8th.
It is actually International Scotch Day.
It is International Scotch Day. And Matt and I will be doing the show with you, and Matt and I will be on location doing the show with you.
You will. It won't be about Scotch, however.
It will not be about Scotch, no.
Oh, we should have planned this much earlier.
We should have figured it out, but
that would have worked so well.
Hopefully the location we'll be at, which will be undisclosed, which will be disclosed next week, has maybe a I don't know, wee heavy maybe or something along those lines, so we can actually.
I may have to go out and get a nice bottle of Scotch for that show.
We'll have to figure it out. But again, Deb, thank you for coming on. We'll definitely work on that with Dan. We'll definitely book this show. We'll definitely get it together. I would love to,
But
proceed
also,
with
we want to hear about more of your projects.
We want to hear about the projects too. Yeah, you have so many. I mean, we literally, honestly, folks, we literally scratched the surface of Deb's projects. So we have much more to talk about with her.
Scratch the surface of her portfolio.
There you go.
And if you get up to Jersey to do your research, then that could be another another show when it's either during or when it's complete. I'd love to have Jeff on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a legend in the New Jersey craft beer scene.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. We could do that. We should do that. We'll put that together. So
yeah, and it's funny because with Jeff, when I first met him, I met him at Carton Brewing. Augie introduced us, said, Dave, this is only one. Dave, this is Jeff. Jeff, this is Dave. And he walked away. We talked for about an hour or so when he came back to begin with.
All right.
After an hour, Augie came back, looked at us. There's 2. I won't go to 3. And he looks at us and goes, oh, by the way, letter, samurai, letter. Because we knew each other by our on-screen names, our online names, not by our real names. And we've been speaking for an hour about beer without knowing who the other one was.
There you go.
So once we realized who the other one was,
pretty funny.
The conversation entirely changed. And oh my God, we had so much
continued
fun.
From there. Exactly.
Yeah, it was about another 3 hours of conversation.
Well, there you go. That's my point. So. Anyway, all right. So
he's a phenomenal guy, and we'll get you hooked up with him as far as
awesome.
We'll definitely put that together. And then when you do get up here, we'll get a show together with Jeff. We'll at least get together with Jeff at least.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely put the show together with Dan too. I definitely want to do that. And
I'm sure he'd love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. All right. Deb. Stay. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
We'll be. We want to talk to you after we sign off.
Yeah,
but
John's got to run through his spiel.
I got to run through my spiel really quick. So we'll wrap the show up for today. On that note, we want to thank everybody for watching. And for those of you just watching,
remember to breathe.
I know. And for those of you just listening to the audio podcast, thanks for listening. Don't forget to visit our website, www.lageroom.com. That's LAGERROOM.com. And please remember, like us and follow us on all of our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our YouTube channel. All of them are at The Lager Room. Remember, we go live with the video podcast on both Facebook and YouTube every Tuesday night around 6:30 Eastern Time. And for those that you just want to listen to the audio podcast, you can do so.
Say around 7. It's closer to 7.
Well, it depends. But around 6:30. So for those of you who just want to listen to the audio podcast, you can do so on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcast, and iHeartRadio as well. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to one or more of those feeds, and you will never miss a show. Again, thanks for following along with us. Deb, thank you so very much for coming on the show. It's been great.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is wonderful.
Absolutely. Oh, it's been great. Love it. That was a great show. Have a great rest of your week. Have a wonderful weekend. Drink a lot of beer, but drink responsibly. And we will talk to you soon, folks.
And
you were going to say?
Local. I said no.
And drink local. Yes, absolutely. And enjoy, folks. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Cheers.